Well, greetings and salutations to the 310 tribe, wherever you might be tonight. Good to be back on with you. If you can hear me and see me, give me a thumbs up. I guess my thumbs are disappearing. Well, hello. How is everybody today? Lisa, Jonathan, Margarita, the Kate Roberts, Mike T. Justice, Sue, Sherry, Believing is Seeing, Renee Smith, who's the first one on tonight? Stacy, okay, I see you. Ozmouse, and I got your note about Stacy, and I thought I had already added her, but I will go back and double check. Ozmouse is the first one. Pam Lester, Icarillion, Watcher for Jesus, Catterlin, Kelly Schultz, Coco Bear. Yes. All right. Well, hey, glad everybody's here. And another crazy week has gone by with just the world is just coming unhinged, as it were. And so got a good program tonight. I hopefully will not go 3 hours like I did last night. So I need to stay focused and stick to my notes. That's the key, is to stick to the notes. Just real quick, coming up, so I'll do my Substack tomorrow about 5:30ish, somewhere there. So if you want to come get on the camera with me, you can. Just really that's more of us just hanging out, talking about stuff, share some stuff with you guys. Tomorrow, what's going on? Wednesday, I'll be on with Pastor Gary, probably around 4 p.m. Central Standard Time. Then Monday will be obviously Monday Night Live. Tuesday or Wednesday maybe Substack, and then Thursday I'm recording with somebody new, Pastor Mike Spalding. I don't know if you guys know who he is. He's been around for a minute, but it's the first time he and I have ever done anything together. And I don't know if that's going to be live or if that's like pre-recorded, but that will be Thursday. And then just upcoming Las Vegas conference, the 20th through the 22nd. And if somebody wants to throw the link in for that at some point, they can. And then we've got Mississippi, May 2nd, and that's going to be in Flowood, Mississippi. That's, again, a great conference, great time to be there if you're in the area. And then for North Texas here, I'll be speaking at the Christ in Prophecy or Lamb and Lion Ministries, Nathan Jones, Tim Moore, here in McKinney, Texas, June 13th. So that is the plan. Oh, and I do have to do I am going to be speaking in West Texas. I guess it's West Texas. It's about 5 hours from where I'm at. Sometime in April. So I got to hammer out a time when I'm going to be able to go over to that church and hang out there for the night and I guess the weekend. My mom is on. Hey, Mom, good to see you. I loved your pictures today on your little reels, like on Facebook. That was very nice. And let's see, Wes Smith, Melody Phillips, Emma Berean, Brooke is on, Aldo, Sherry, Yvonne, Kennedy, Mikey T. Justice, Peach, Mountain Sky, Believing and Seeing, Gerard, and James Wells. All right. Well, tonight, I really want to, I think last week I talked a lot about the kind of the geopolitical things that were happening. And obviously last Monday, we didn't know, that, the war hadn't started yet in with Iran. So, a lot of things have obviously, things that I thought were going to happen have happened, right? We did actually have major strategic strikes there. But I do not think this is boots on the ground like Iraq 2.0. It's not going to be anything like that. It's definitely not nation building. But I want to talk about tonight about what is Trump's plans for peace and security in the world, and how does he see the world? And we hear a lot of pundits talking about this. We hear a lot of experts. We've even had people within his administration, Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, and others have spoken out about kind of what they are trying to achieve and the things they're trying to do. And so what does the world look like for the next 6 months? So I think I've got a handle on what Trump is trying to do. I don't pretend to be the expert. I could be wrong. This is just how I think he sees the world. And if you go back and listen to all of his interviews from the 1980s, the 1990s, you can see that his pattern really hasn't changed a whole lot in terms of how he views the world. So, with all that said, let me start off with some scripture first. And let me share my screen here. If I can figure out how to do this again. Share screen. Here we go. Daniel 7:23 through 25. Thus he said, the fourth beast shall be a fourth kingdom on the earth, which shall be different from all other kingdoms, and it shall devour the whole earth, trample it and break it in pieces. The 10 horns are 10 kings who shall arise from this kingdom, and another shall arise after them. He shall be different from the first ones, and he shall subdue 3 kings. He shall speak pompous words against the Most High, shall persecute the saints of the Most High, and shall intend to change the times and the law. And the saints shall be given into his hand for a time, times, and half a time. All right, so you and I know that this is speaking about the final beast kingdom. For those who study prophecy at all, would recognize that the 10 horns that we see in Daniel 7 are the same 10 toes that we see on the statue of Nebuchadnezzar in chapter 2 of Daniel, as well as the 10 horns in Revelation 12, Revelation 13, and Revelation 17, as well as the crowns. We know that at least in Revelation 13, the beast that is coming out of the sea is like this chimera. It's like a hybrid animal mixed with all the different previous beasts that we see in Daniel 7. And those are also indicative of nations, because in Daniel chapter 2, Nebuchadnezzar sees this giant statue made out of all these different kinds of metal, and they are representative of the nation. So the head of gold was Babylon. The shoulders and arms, upper arms, are silver, representative of Persia. Then we have the stomach made out of bronze, and then the legs of iron and the feet of iron mixed with miry clay. So we know that those, because Daniel tells us that those are kingdoms, right? Daniel tells Nebuchadnezzar that you're the head of gold, and after you another nation will rise and will take over, and then after them, and so on and so forth. So in Daniel chapter 2, it's a statue. In Daniel 7, we see them as animals. And you have these animals that have different, they're not natural animals, they seem to have like different kinds of attributes given to them. And then we see in Revelation 13, this amalgamation of all of these animals kind of rolled up into one, coming out of the sea. And according to Revelation 17, the sea is indicative of the sea of nations. It's the sea of peoples that this system rises out of, right? So this is the final beast kingdom. And we take note that a couple of things in here, that it says the 10 horns are 10 kings who shall arise from this kingdom. So there's this final kingdom, and out of this kingdom arises these 10 kings. And out of those 10 kings arises another one, a little horn, right? And that little horn subdues 3, and he ends up taking over the whole thing. And so we know that that man is the same man from Daniel 9:27. He is the prince who is to come. He is coming out of the people who shall destroy the temple and the sanctuary and the city there in Daniel 9:26. So we know that was the Romans. So what we don't know, and we can't be dogmatic about, is, is it out of Italy today, or are we talking out of the Roman Empire, somewhere within the Roman Empire, which stretched from, North Africa to the Near East, all the way up through Turkey, up through Europe at the time, Germania, all the way up into Britain, and going only so far as to where the Scottish lived. Apparently the Scottish were too tough for the Romans, so they stopped there, built Hadrian's Wall, and then they stayed there for a few centuries and then left. So the Roman Empire is a vast a territory largely surrounding the Mediterranean that the Antichrist could come out of. So that's really what we know. What we don't see in terms of the last days player is a nation like the United States. And that is not to say that the United States isn't there in some way we don't understand it yet. I know people, friends of mine on both sides, think that the United States could be Mystery Babylon. I'm not saying that it is or it isn't. I'm still kind of undecided on that. I know you've got others, Dr. Andy Woods and others, who believe that Babylon is Babylon in Iraq. And again, I'm not closing that door completely either. So I think when it comes to a lot of these future prophecies that have not yet happened, we have the general outline. I've said this many times, but I look at Daniel 9:27 as the thesis, right? That's where all the prophecy centers around this 70 weeks of Daniel. And then from there, you have the outline, which is given to us in the Olivet Discourse, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. And then we have the detailed narrative in Revelation. But even still, so we have the general timeline, we have the general flow of things. We don't have all the details. So there's going to be some things that we just don't know. And it's called Mystery, Babylon for a reason. When there's something that's associated with a mystery, especially if a mystery from God, I don't really think that anybody can be dogmatic until it actually has its fulfillment, because none of us can see into the future. Now, we can certainly see, unless it's explained in the scripture, we're not going to really know what those things are. So you either have to read them in scripture and try to make an educated hypothesis off of that, or you have to wait until the actual fulfillment of that comes about. And I look at things like even things that aren't listed as mysteries but weren't understood in previous times, like the mark of the beast. If you lived 100 years ago, you would have really had, scholars, theologians, everybody would have had a really difficult time trying to wrap their minds around how can one person control the whole world and control who can buy and sell, at a time when you didn't even have phones and you didn't have TVs, you didn't have anything, any of that stuff. You had radio, was basically it. So that was a time that people would have really struggled. But as time went on and technology advanced, we started to soon understand that we started to see how it could become possible after much time had passed in technology and everything. The technology in the world finally caught up with Bible prophecy. And one thing I want to say this before I go too far, because I'll forget it, and then I'll be mad at myself for forgetting this. But so I was talking to my mom on Sunday, and she had brought up a really good point that I had not considered. In all the time that I've studied, and even all the time that I spent studying, I guess maybe I've touched on it a little bit inadvertently, not really honing in on it, but coming to the understanding of this generation. She said, back in her day growing up, she couldn't imagine a day like today. She couldn't imagine living at a time when we had the internet and Wi-Fi and Bluetooth and touch screen and laser weapons and satellites and all this kind of crazy stuff that's going on. So she would not be able to imagine a day like this, but we don't have that problem. We've lived through all these crazy changes. We've lived through these radical leaps in technology, in geopolitics, just like this weekend with the Ayatollah, being assassinated there. I think for most of my life, the Ayatollah has been this boogeyman that's lived in Iran. I can think back to the 90s and the 80s in the movies. Those were always kind of like the big bad in the Middle East, and so it feels weird living in a world without this Ayatollah guy. It feels pretty good, actually. I mean, I'm not nostalgic, and I don't miss him or anything like that. I'm just, it's different. The world has changed, in a pretty profound way. So we can look at the future, and we can imagine what the future looks like because we've lived through a vast amounts of changes. But my mom's generation, in growing up as a kid in Oklahoma and in North Texas area, it seems like, especially, being poor, and that's, kind of just coming out of the World War II time frame. They couldn't imagine a world like this, whereas we can imagine much more than this because we've seen much more. We've been exposed to much more. So I think that that's an interesting thing to consider when we talk about this generation. But with that said, I want to touch on my notes here as soon as I can figure out where they are. All right. So if you want to understand, and again, I'm not shilling for Trump. I'm listening to what he says. I'm looking at what he's doing. I'm listening to other people that are familiar with his style of leadership, and even before he went into politics, like how he sees the world, how he does things. And I think I have a decent understanding of what's supposed to take place here and what's going to be happening and how that fits into Bible prophecy as we go forward in time. But if you want to understand his broader geopolitical programs, you have to begin with the basic question of what materially advances America's interests, both in the near term and the long term, right? And that's all really what is the bottom line for Make America Great Again. That whole campaign is, and this whole mindset is, what is best for America, right? And that framework then emerges. It is neither isolationist, nor is it like this unchecked interventionist or adventurist, that we've had in the past with past presidents. A lot of what we've seen over the last 75 years has largely been, the United States as being the kind of the pit bull on the leash, and the European elites kind of holding the leash. And when they want to let us loose to go advance our agenda against some particular big bad, then they let us go a little bit. And then right when we're about to win, they yank it back, right? I mean, we won World War II, but beyond World War II, we haven't won a war per se in all that time. And it's because the European elites, the British, the people that are insanely wealthy, generationally wealthy, like their great grandkids will never have to work if they were going to live that long. And these are the old money families. I'm not trying to get all conspiratorial, but there are people that have immense wealth and influence, and that permeates over here to the United States through politicians, through generals, through businessmen, through NGOs, all sorts of things. And it finds its influence through all manners of things that we seem to always be reacting to everything in the world. And really, it's only been under Trump's second term here that we've seen America unleashed, and doing exactly, I can't remember if it was Pete Hegseth or if it was Marco Rubio, but we're a superpower. We're going to start acting like a superpower, and that whole mindset is it's a paradigm shift from any other administration in the past. And we'll get into that too tonight. And so this isn't the great game. This isn't what the British had played for centuries while they were the dominant power in the world. And if you're wondering what the great game is, it's been this kind of a chess game rivalry between the Russian Empire and the British over controlling all of Asia and Central Asia. And they used espionage, they used proxies, they used buffer states, economic leverage, military posturing, all that kind of stuff was in play. And some of that is this with regard to the economic leverage, but Trump has no interest in putting boots on the ground and doing the whole nation building agenda that the Bushes had. He has no appetite for that. In fact, that's why he left the government in control there in Venezuela. He took out Maduro and his wife, and then told the vice president, "Hey, if you don't dance to the tune we play, we're coming for you next," and put the fear of God into them. So, of course, they're going to do what he says because they don't want to go out like Maduro did. And with that, you have to understand the strategic, like linchpins, if I can put it that way. These are the things that Trump has a plan, and these particular places are critical to achieving that plan, that the grand plan, right? This isn't a game to him. This is the grand plan. He wants to go down as the best president that's ever lived. I mean, and you can count that to his ego. You can account that to his hubris, whatever you want to call it. But I think in his mind that by achieving this greatness for himself, he will have achieved that for the United States. And also, you got to keep in mind he's not operating through the lens of Bible prophecy. He is not operating. I mean, yeah, I would even say that with maybe the exception of Mike Huckabee, the ambassador to Israel, and maybe Marco Rubio, in the sense that he's probably at least familiar with some of this stuff. None of them are really operating under the premise that we only have a few years left. They're still thinking we have decades to, centuries left. So that's how they're thinking through their thought process here. But as we read in Daniel 7, there is a system that's coming. This system that I read has not happened yet. It is still on the horizon. We can start to hear the hoofbeats, if you will, of the four horsemen beginning to ride, of which the rider on the white horse indicates this beast system, or the beast himself. So we're starting to hear the noise on the horizon. We're starting to see the skies darkening, and the storm is threatening. And that storm that's coming is going to be the tribulation, the 70th week of Daniel, 7-year tribulation. And it's going to be unlike anything the world's ever seen before. It is going to, right now we're somewhere in the neighborhood of 8 billion people. By the end of the 7 years, the world's population will be easily below 1 billion. So of that, 7 billion will have been removed either by death or rapture, or death. I mean, and those that don't die from all the judgments and don't die from the horrific violence and chaos and anarchy that's going to be coming, will be wrapped up there at the end with either Armageddon, or they'll be wrapped up into the sheep and goat judgment. And that will be, people will be very scarce at that time that survive all the way through the end of the tribulation. People will be, I forget the passage, men will be scarce as like this particular precious stones that are hard to find. Well, let's get back to Trump's linchpins. If you understand what he's trying to do here, it makes sense. So he's got the world basically divided up into two. He's got the Western Hemisphere and the Eastern Hemisphere. And in the Western Hemisphere, there are a few strategic places that he needs to lock down in order to make his Monroe Doctrine, which is the Monroe Doctrine from 1823, really come into play or successful. Obviously, we know that he had, from day one, right out of the gate, was intent on kicking China out of the Panama Canal. The Panama Canal, the Suez Canal, the Strait of Hormuz, these are some majorly strategic choke points in the world, and he is not about to let the enemy that he fears the most, being China, have any kind of control over that type of leverage on the United States. Because if we ever went to war with China for whatever reason, they obviously would shut that down, blow it up, damage it, and then we would spend the next, however long we were fighting them, sailing all the way around the tip of South America to get over to the Pacific. So he is not about to let China have control of the Panama Canal, which he fixed that rather pretty early on in his second administration. The next one is Venezuela, which wasn't on a lot of people's bingo cards. Venezuela, largely just been thought of as a banana republic, since Chavez and Maduro have been in power for, 17, 18, 20 years or whatever, however long it's been. I think since 99 or 2000 when Chavez took over. But that used to be the wealthiest country in South America, and they just ran that country into the ground because socialism doesn't work. It doesn't work. It's never worked. It will never work. It just I don't know. I don't know why people are so in love with the idea of it. It is terrible. Everywhere that it's introduced, it destroys the culture. It destroys the economy. It ends up with massive amounts of deaths. And it always ends up in it ultimately ends up in its final fulfilled state of communism, which then means more and more death. So Venezuela was strategic, and in order for him because got to think too, Venezuela was making all kinds of deals with Russia and China. The night that they went in, that day, the Chinese envoy had been there. This whole envoy had come over from China. They'd signed some 600 deals with Venezuela, with Maduro and his government, to provide all sorts of services and provide all sorts. They just were getting their hooks all into Venezuela. And so, and not only that, but China's got a number of, I don't know what their intelligence agency is called, but number of places positioned all throughout South America. And so, Venezuela certainly won't be the last place that Trump has done getting China out of South America, but it was a linchpin, because when you remove a hostile government from leadership out of Venezuela, what happens then is that causes Cuba then to collapse, because Cuba had been on life support, completely dependent on Venezuela for oil and for money for really the last 10, 15 years. And in what little else they had to get from support, they got from Mexico. So now you have Cuba, which is a Cold War leftover, relic from the Cold War, is the last kind of vestige of Russian dominant influence in the Western Hemisphere. By taking out Venezuela, now he also gets 2 for 1. He's going to get Cuba as well, because they will regime collapse this year at some point. Then you have the stopping of the narcotics that were flowing into the United States, courtesy of Venezuela, as well as the cartels. And they were also in bed with China, who provided a lot of the materials that they would then produce and turn into fentanyl and everything else. So we saw just, was it last week or the week before, with the cartel, when they took out El Mencho, when they took out the leader of the new Jalisco Generation cartel, who was the most powerful drug lord in Mexico. By taking him out, then you have a power struggle, power vacuum. All these other cartels begin to try and make their moves on the new Jalisco Generation folks and their territories there in the state of Jalisco. And then you have infighting amongst themselves. It exposes a lot of the rot there within the government. And we're not done with Mexico yet. He's just getting started with Mexico, I believe. But then you also have Greenland, right? Greenland is going to be critically important to his Golden Dome plan, which is very similar to what the Israelis have with their Iron Dome. Yet as the world gets warmer and the Arctic begins to thaw out, all those trade passes are going to begin to open up. And you already have the Russians, I was going to say flying, but they're traveling their submarines all up through there, and their warships and things like that. So the Russians are very comfortable working in that cold climate. And Trump does not want them to have easy access to the United States. Moreover, having that Golden Dome there in Greenland is what's going to, in his mind, create this shield that anything that is launched out of Russia or launched from Asia towards the United States will be destroyed before it even gets out of atmosphere. That launches, it goes up into the sky, and there it's going to be destroyed right over from where it's launched from. And that's part of the Golden Dome plan that he has. Now, so Greenland, and then, as well as Canada. I know a lot of people don't think that Canada will break apart. I tend to think that they will, or at least Alberta. We know that Quebec has long had a independence movement going back, I think, to the 80s or 90s. And they've had all kinds of independent referendums there. So I tend to think that unless Carney is replaced with a really kind of true conservative, I don't really see Canada staying together. I'm not saying that Alberta will become part of the United States. It may become an independent um, nation, I guess, if you can call it that. But it will definitely be in link and in sync with the United States. So I think that could happen this year as well. As fast as things are moving, I would not be surprised if Alberta breaks away this year. So Dora says, your mom and I are the same age. We've seen a lot. Yes, y'all have. Y'all have seen so much change in this world. All right. So that's the Western Hemisphere. Now, in the Eastern Hemisphere, you know, Trump's been all about the Abraham Accords. That is going to be his crowning achievement. If he can achieve some kind of peace in the Middle East, he can die a happy man, right? That's in his mind. He will have done something that no other president has ever been able to do. And so you cannot have the Abraham Accords become successful with Iran still in, you know, with the IRGC and the Ayatollahs still in power there. So he knows that by taking out the leadership there, especially at this time now where they're at their weakest because all the people are protesting, they haven't had any water, the government cut off the internet, you know, hardlined everything. So they're at their absolute weakest right now, and Israel was going to make a move, and they're going to do it with or without us. And so the United States, again, was not that we were led by Israel into this. I think this was, sorry, my nose is itching really bad, but this was always going to be part of Trump's plan. And I think right now there's no better time, just giving all the stuff that's going on internal to Iran right now, than to do it now. And so that's I think part of the calculation that he's made. And again, he does not want Iraq 2.0. He's said that just as plainly as I'm saying it. He was asked by, you know, a reporter asked him this and said, why didn't you remove the leadership from Venezuela, the Chavista government? And he said, do you remember Iraq? Bush took out all the leadership, took out the law police, took out everybody, and it created ISIS. So he's like, I'm not trying to create ISIS. I'm not trying to do Iraq 2.0. And the other thing that people are saying is that, well, you can't have regime change if you don't have boots on the ground. I don't know. He's come out and said some pretty pointed things, as well as Secretary of War Hegseth. This is to the people. This is your time. This is your time to rise up. You'll never have a time like this again. So they may get aid from Mossad and from CIA and from other intelligence groups that may be helping the leaders out there as well. You know, you have the Reza Shah Pahlavi in waiting, the crown prince in exile, basically waiting for the right time to come back in. And you would essentially have at least a temporary transition leader that would help bring Iran back out of the Stone Ages and into the 21st century. And so I think that they calculated between Trump and Netanyahu and their respective leaderships that there wasn't going to be a better time than this. And so, Trump is if anything, he's a master at keeping people guessing, right? Because he let the ships sit off the coast of Venezuela for like a month or two before doing anything other than taking out, drug boats. So people weren't really sure what he was going to do. And I think that's what he calculates into his planning, is keeping the enemy unaware of your plans. And that's very much art of war stuff, Sun Tzu, making sure that your enemies have no idea what you're planning to do, which is smart, which means that he could not go to Congress and say, hey, this is what I'm planning on doing, and let them debate for the next 4 months on whether or not we should or shouldn't do it. He has the War Powers Act. Every president before him, going back to Gerald Ford, has used that, enacted it in some way, shape, or form. So this is not out of the norm. He just has to notify the Gang of Eight within 48 hours of committing, starting the action, and which he's done. And he's basically followed precedent on that. So there's Iran. Iran in the Eastern Hemisphere is also strategically linked to Russia and China. So right now, by taking out Venezuela, which had been critical to the movement and facilitating of illicit, like sanctioned oil, and Russia was using these ghost fleets and moving back and forth between Venezuela and wherever else Russia sells their oil. And then you had the drug trafficking, you had the money laundering, you had all sorts of nasty things going on with the Maduro regime that the Chinese and the Russians were both enabling. And so now, if you look at the big picture, what is Trump really doing? He is cutting the legs off from China and from Russia, because their axis of friendly nations that were on their same agenda, to kind of either weaken the United States or topple the United States. They were all kind of working in cahoots together to get around the sanctions, get around the embargoes. So by taking out Venezuela and Iran, Trump is really cutting the legs out of China. And here's the thing: I don't know that they will take that lying down. I think because we have so many forces committed right now to the Middle East, they may make a move on Taiwan. That could happen. I could easily see that happening. Now, again, Taiwan is a porcupine. I mean, it is armed to the teeth, and it's not going to be as easy as as most people think it would be. But it certainly would be disastrous for the world if China decides to go that route. And so that's one thing to keep an eye on is what happens with Taiwan, because that's Xi Jinping's, that is his dream, is to reunite Taiwan into the mainland. So if he can do that, he will die a happy man. He won't be happy after he dies, but I mean, he'll at least say, I've achieved this thing that I've been wanting to do my whole life. And so has Mao, and so has every other leader, that's, been in place since Mao, been trying to get Taiwan back under the control of the mainland China. So all that to say is that these attacks have been multifaceted. They are not simply just one-offs, like, Trump on a whim decided just to strike Iran because, they're mean to him or they're chanting death to America. No, this has been going on, ironically, 47 years, and this is the 47th president. So I don't know. Maybe he just liked the symmetry and all that, and he liked the idea of being the 47th president that in the 47th year took out one of America's longest foes that has been destabilizing the world for the last half century. So maybe that has something to do with it as well. Let me see. So in this conflict, I think probably within the next week or two, we should see the toppling of the IRGC. Depending on, and it's really hard. It's really hard to keep up on all the footage that we're seeing that's coming out, whether you're watching it on X or wherever you're seeing it. It's hard to keep up with everything that's happening because of the footage you're watching. You don't know if it's from like today or if it's from 2 years ago in Syria. It's really hard to. You really have to be careful and vet the information that you're getting, because so much of it's coming out. And I've already seen like AI generated, or not even AI generated. These were like footages of rockets being launched or jets falling out of the sky. Now we know that 3 American F-15s had been shot down by the Kuwaiti air defense on accident, friendly fire. But there was some footage going around Twitter, and it was from a video game from whatever year it came out. And so you really have to be careful with a lot of the footage and stuff that's coming from Twitter, from all over, because people are just throwing whatever up to get clicks or whatever. So yeah, 2CTV is he's a pretty good source. He tends to vet his stuff pretty well. Preston Stewart, The Enforcer. There's a couple of channels that I would recommend in terms of watching for war footage and for trying to get stuff that's already been vetted. So those are some good channels to keep an eye on. So I don't, I'm almost 100% certain that we will not commit ground troops to this. I would just say I'm 100% certain that he's not going to. That's the last thing he wants to do. He does not want this Iraq 2.0 hanging over the election year, especially since he is not a proponent of war. He is a proponent of peace, hence the doves and all that stuff in the picture. Yet, it's kind of be peace through strength, where America flexes and lets the world know, hey, we're a superpower. We totally intend to act like a superpower from now on out. Thank you, Rachel. Appreciate that. So that is generally where I see things going. If he can get the government to change out, he's not saying that the United States is going to change the regime. He's telling the people to rise up and to take control of their government. So this is profoundly different from what Bush did in Iraq in 2003, as well as what we did in Afghanistan. And we went straight in. We did the shock and awe kind of stuff, and then it went straight into nation building, and we became like an NGO. And so when I was there in 2005 in Iraq, 2005, 2006, I mean, we had hundreds of soldiers dying every month at the height of the war. And, for what? What we were trying to achieve was to make America Junior over there, and it was never going to work. I knew that then. I knew it wasn't going to work because the people there, they've never had freedom. They wouldn't even know what to do with it if they got it. And when they got it, they immediately handed it over to some kind of cleric who then radicalized a bunch of them, and they turned into militias and they started fighting us. So there is no, until you change the religion there, you're not going to get any type of really democracy in any of those Islamic nations. Yeah, people make exceptions for like Dubai and Abu Dhabi and Bahrain and some places where things are a little bit more lax, but they're still a theocracy. They're still governed by Islam. They don't allow Christianity in there. They don't allow other religions in there. So they're still pretty archaic when it comes to, even though they're advanced and modern and all that, they still, at their core, they're an Islamic nation. So they're going to follow Sharia law, some loosely, some more, stronger, but it doesn't take much for Islamism to radicalize really quickly. And if you remember back to 79, when the Shah was overthrown and the Ayatollah came to power in Iran, that same year, there was a revolution of sorts in Saudi Arabia, where the Wahhabis took over. And they embraced it because the king at the time was afraid that he was going to get overthrown. So they embraced these radical Wahhabist, which is the most hardcore of the Sunni religion. And it basically made life hell there for the Saudis for the next 40 years. So I see a lot of changes happening in the Middle East from this. And I think that this is hugely prophetic and game changing, or staging prophetically this kingdoms that are going to rise out of all this chaos that's happening right now. Now, there are a couple of black swan events I think that could potentially happen. One is obviously Taiwan. If China thinks that we are so tied up in the Middle East, or if this drags on for any length of time and we expend through all of our ammo and missiles and things like that, China may say, well, now is our time. Now is the great time, the best time to take Taiwan, because the U.S. is out of Schlitz. They don't have any more bullets or anything. And they're way over there. It's going to take them time. By the time they get over here, we'll have already taken Taiwan, and that'll just be the way things are. So that is obviously a black swan event that could happen. We don't know. We know that Xi had looked at 2027 as the year to do this. he may speed that up because of what's happened. We've just taken out two of his biggest allies, from the world, Venezuela and Iran. So now he may seek retribution by taking Taiwan. But you also have Japan beginning to rearm and rebuild their military strength. We still have allies in South Korea and in the Philippines, and Vietnam is no friend of China. So I'm not saying it's going to be easy. I'm just saying that they may look at this as their opportune time to take advantage of the chaos that's happening over in the Middle East. And then another thing is that neither Russia or China sent aid to. They're not helping Iran right now. China gave a little bit of help. Russia rather. He was like the Secretary of Defense, his assistant or whatever, was speaking earlier. And he said, well, talking about why they haven't come to the aid of Iran, of the regime, he said, well, we made that deal with the Ayatollah and he's dead. So who are we making this deal with now? We're not going to commit anymore. We're not going to go down there and get ourselves killed because that the deal that we had is gone now. So they've washed their hands of Iran, and so now they're just kind of wholly focused on Ukraine. And then speaking of another black swan type event, if China does make a move on Taiwan, obviously they are holding the leash for North Korea. They could tell Kim Jong-un, hey, now's your time. If you want to take South Korea, we'll back you. And so they may unleash North Korea onto South Korea. And then even if the U.S. does manage to get some type of a force over there, now he's got to divide that force into two. He's got to deal with, we've got to deal with what's happening in the Korean Peninsula as well as what's happening down in Taiwan. So there's that possibility. And then another one is another black swan. It's not even really a black swan event. It's actually ongoing, is the war right now between Pakistan and Afghanistan. And I want to pull this map up because most people aren't typically familiar with Afghanistan. So let me see here. All right. So if you can see where my mouse is going down, this is called the Duran line. And this line is an arbitrary line that was drawn up. I almost said drawn up by Sir Mortimer Duran in 1893. He was a British civil servant stationed, I think, in the area, but he had been working out some kind of a deal with the Rama Khan. And this whole area used to be just one country. It wasn't divided like it is now. And if you look at the line here, basically it divided up ethnic tribes that had lived together for hundreds of thousands of years. So you had family on both sides of these, and tribes. The same tribes were now divided by this line, and it wouldn't be that bad because Afghanistan has never respected that line. They've always figured that was just a suggestion. But on the Pakistani side, they've treated that line like it was written in Holy Scripture. I mean, it was sacrosanct. I mean, it was like very important. And so they, bolstered up their borders and, became their own nation. And they've had these number of skirmishes over the last year or so that has really escalated quite powerfully here in the last few days. And to the point where the Afghanistan Taliban, which is the government there now, has been attacking the border, killing Pakistani soldiers, etc. And the Pakistani Air Force retaliated by launching attacks into Kabul, into Kandahar. If you see down here in Coast, I was stationed right here. We're just a spitting distance from Pakistan. And I tell you, the people there, they don't recognize that line at all. Like we couldn't cross that line, but they could go back and forth all day long. I mean, so it wasn't like like the Mexican border here where you got to stand in line for hours and hours just to get through and stuff. No, you just maybe one border guard or whatever, and you just cross over. And so The Pakistanis didn't care because they're probably cousins with the people that are coming over. And, you know, all during the 20 years of fighting in Afghanistan, the Pakistani government, in particular the ISI, which is their intelligence agency, was sheltering the Taliban during the winter months here in Waziristan. So you had North Waziristan and then South Waziristan. And so the Taliban would come fight us in the spring and in the summer. And as it started getting colder, they'd all come back over here and they'd rest for the winter and they'd find sanctuary. And so the ISI was always double crossing the US all that time. And the Pakistani government was double crossing us while we were sending them aid, military aid and financial aid. And they were sheltering the Taliban. And you got to remember that there's Taliban on both sides of the border. Taliban is the Pakistani Taliban. And then you have what we think of as the Taliban in Afghanistan. That is they're kind of one and the same. And so they've had a number of battles being fought. And then after Pakistan bombed Kabul and Kandahar, pretty significantly, I would add, you had suicide bombers and I think drones that were flown in and blew up in Islamabad and Quetta, which were targeting, I think, mosque and everything like that. So they were pretty vicious and attacking. So my thought is that if somehow the Taliban on both sides of the border were to partner up and they overthrew the government there in Islamabad, then you would have a nuclear armed Taliban, which obviously is worse than a nuclear armed Iran, because the Taliban are just as crazy. And they would not be good, right? As Trump would say, not good. But the Indians down in India under Modi would not tolerate that either. So then you could have you could actually have a nuclear exchange if India decided we are going to blow up all of their missile sites and make sure that they cannot, or they don't have access to any nuclear bombs. So India could certainly launch some preemptive strikes into there and destroy all their missile silos and things like that. So, or their mobile rocket launchers, whatever they're using to fire these or to launch these nuclear missiles they've got. So those are some black swan events that could happen. We could get bogged down into Mexico. If we got stuck in fighting the cartel in Mexico, that could turn out to be, I mean, honestly, I don't think it would be much of a fight, but you never know. I mean, things sometimes go sideways. You could easily roll through like we did in Iraq. We rolled all the way in. People were cheering for us. And then within a few months, you've got people shooting at us and laying roadside bombs, which most of those roadside bombs came out of Iran. Thank you, Carrie Nelson. Appreciate you. So some things to watch. And those could be some things that derail Trump's plans going forward if they were to happen. Another thing to consider, though, is would be the let me see if I can pull it up here. Let me share this one too. This was I got this off of Twitter. Share screen. Got it. Share. Okay. We're talking about oil, and by basically taking out Iran and Venezuela, we are really trying to cripple because China doesn't have any oil. They have to import like 70% of all their oil, and so they had largely been getting it from these two places. And so by taking them out, and if for whatever reason, the rest of the world were able to get sanctions put on China for, if they were, let's just say they were to attack Taiwan, or they were to do something that was hostile to the United States, we could potentially convince enough nations to embargo China for oil. I know that seems like a long shot, but I mean, it certainly is not out of the realm of possibility, is all I'm saying. So, but we are definitely trying to cripple China, and Russia is already in a bad way. So, hey, thank you, Amy. I appreciate that. So they definitely are in a bad way already. Demographically, they're in a bad way. Economically, they're in a bad way. I mean, Russia's is hurting all over. So I think that this kind of falls in line with the U.S. Really trying to cut the legs out from underneath China and to prevent them from being a threat going forward. Okay. Let me talk a little bit about some history. And first and foremost, I'm a historian. I love history. I think it's so critical to understanding what's happening today is by looking back and not only just looking at what happened, but kind of looking at some of the trends and where things were going and why we're in the situation we're in today. And if you go, again, I talked about the Duran line, that was in 1893. 1897, you had the first Zionist Congress there in Europe, I think in Austria. I can't remember where they held the first. Somebody in the chat might know, but Theodore Herzl led that. 1914 to 1918, obviously we had the World War I, or what they call the Great War. The Ottoman Turks had sided with the Germans and the Austro-Hungarians. And then by 1916, we knew that, or at least the West knew, that the war was going to win. The Allied powers, if you will, in the détente, what were they called? The Entente or the détente? I can't remember the name that we had for them. It wasn't like the Allies and the Axis. It was the Central Powers, and then you had the Allies. I guess I think they were just called the Central Powers, but they were losing, and you had in 1916 the Sykes-Picot Agreement, where the French and the British decided to carve up the Middle East. Thank you, Smidgen. Appreciate that. Or Tamara. You had 1917, the Balfour Declaration, which again was going to give the Jews a chance to return back to their ancestral homeland. 1921, the San Remo Conference. You had the League of Nations, the British Mandate for Palestine and the Middle East. 1923, the British began taking control over the oil fields in Iran or Persia at the time. British Petroleum, or BP, if you've ever gotten gas from them. From there, and I'm going to jump over a lot of stuff because I don't want to rehash the last century. But 1951 to 1953, Mossadegh was elected in Iran, and he was tired of the British ripping them off, so they nationalized their oil. And then you had a Western-backed, I think it was MI6, probably the CIA at the time, or OSS, whichever. We had foreign agents helped to overthrow the Mossadegh and install the Shah, who was more friendly to Western influence and selling oil, keeping that deals going with the oil for the West. You had the 1960s, the British created the offshore banking system, which they at that point, after World War II, they knew they were a dying empire. And so they were beginning to hand over their colonies all over the world. And they were still trying to exert influence or maintain their influence and relevance going forward, which is part and parcel why they created this whole system of offshore banking. And that was also a way that's come to be used by narco terrorists, tin pot dictators, everybody's, the cartel, the mafia, all these guys are using offshore banking systems to skirt all the national laws and national finance laws, so they can keep their money liquid. And then that liquidity is what the British and a lot of these European elites have used to help keep America, the United States, off balance, and to powerfully influence American political leaders through bribery, through gifts, and through titles, and through special honors, and all sorts of things that politicians love. And 1967, we have the Six-Day War. 1973, Yom Kippur War. And then in 79, we had the Iranian Revolution, as well as the Saudi I call it a revolution, but it was a reverting back to Wahhabism. And then you had the Iranian Republic, basically, or the Islamic Republic of Iran in '79 stood up, and they began their whole regime by basically taking over the U.S. embassy and then holding the Americans hostage there for 400 something days, 453 days or something. And that basically was the start of the nightmare that is the IRGC and the Ayatollahs. So, and then from the 1980s to the 2000s, you had really the Bank of London and a lot of European monies or financial powers basically kind of dictating to the world, subverting U.S. policy, subverting U.S. agendas abroad. And basically the United States was, basically we were allowed to go and kind of show our military might, but then we were never allowed to win. We were never allowed to dominate even far lesser powers. We just had to sit there and take it and take it and take it and take it, terrorist attack here, an assassination there, roadside bombs here. It was just on and on. It just never ended, and it wasn't always just the Islamists, but I mean, just from everywhere, even the tariffs. I mean, I totally agree with Trump on the tariffs things, that the trade deals have been so unequally balanced for the bulk of the 20th century, because we were using that as a means to help rebuild Europe, rebuild the world from, World War I and World War II. But Europe has long since been able to take care of themselves. Obviously, they make plenty of enough money now to finance their own defense systems, etc. They've just not chosen to do that because they have always had the United States there. And part of why Trump has really enforced this idea of paying, I think it was 2% or 3%, which was the NATO kind of minimum. Now they're up to paying 5%. Each nation is having to pay in 5% and start to look at rebuilding their own defense forces, primarily, or I would say, as a result of, they're now looking at creating some type of a European defense force, some type of European EU army or whatever we're going to call it. And when you have a nation that is now having to pay for all this stuff out of pocket, tanks, jets, bullets, paying soldiers, all that kind of stuff, they have far less spending money, folding money, as we used to say, to throw onto all these liberal, progressive ideas and fanciful welfare states. They can't afford to do both at the same time. We learned that in the 60s, fighting both in Vietnam as well as LBJ's Great Society initiative that basically created a welfare state in the United States. We found out very quickly that we ran out of money, and that's why we abandoned the gold system and went to a fiat, currency. It ultimately became the petrodollar. But once these nations have to start paying for all this stuff themselves, they'll find out very quickly they don't have money to throw out all this other stuff. So it's kind of like two birds with one stone, in a way of making these nations kind of financially responsible for themselves. And now they got to pay their own bills, and they're not going to have money to just bounce, create these artificial welfare systems and 15-minute cities and all the stuff that they've been planning on doing. So it is multifaceted in this, his strategy and what he's trying to do. Obviously, we've had the nuclear deterrence since, I think, Bush Sr. with Iran, dealing with them wanting to create a nuclear weapon or acquire nuclear weapons or nuclear power, to create nuclear weapons, because they want to be on the same status as North Korea. Nobody messes with North Korea because they have nuclear weapons. So the Iran, that's why they've been so hard pressed to get a nuclear weapon, is because once they got that, they knew that nobody else would mess with them. That's not to say, but what that would do in effect, though, is that would create another new arms race in the Middle East, where if Iran has nuclear weapons, now Saudi's going to want them, and and Jordan, and everybody else is going to want them. So, it's trying to lessen the amount of nuclear weapons on the planet and not create more. So I can see a lot of what he's trying to do, and he is really bent on trying to create world peace. And he's having to take out a couple of key thorny places that are holding everything else back up. And once those get removed, then things should start flowing more smoothly in the Middle East. So and the Iranians had been funding. They had all the proxies. They had Hezbollah, they had Islamic Jihad, they had Hamas, they had the Shia militias in Iraq, Shia militias in Syria under Bashar Assad. So the Houthis, they've had all these proxies. They've been funding and propping up all these proxies to create problems for not only the Sunnis in the area, but also not the Sunnis, but like the Gulf states, as well as America and Israel. So when you cut off the head of the snake there, then you're basically going to cut off all the funding for these groups. Now they're going to have to go back and get day jobs and start working. You're not going to just lay around all day eating juju weed and shooting their AKs into the sky and chanting. So they're going to have to actually, because nobody's giving them money anymore. Now they're going to have to start finding ways to eat and start working and stuff. So, a couple more things with regard to what Trump is trying to achieve. He's trying to this whole border peace thing is also key to achieving his dream of the Abraham Accord, or making the Abraham Accord kind of the rule of the jungle, so to speak, going forward. The border peace will be the action board that has got the means and the money to effectively make change all throughout the Middle East and throughout the world, really, starting with Gaza. And the president of Kazakhstan was at a meeting not too long ago, the last few days, and he said something that I think was worth repeating. So his name is Kasim Jomart Tokayev. And he said that, what he basically believes is that this is going to reflect the new reality by reinforcing existing multilateral efforts. And he said, quote, "The world has never seen a move like this. It is absolutely unprecedented because, in essence, it's going to be peace through construction. It's a very innovative concept or project, and it has every chance to become a reality by our joint efforts. Therefore, Mr. President," he's talking to Trump, goes, "I acknowledge and accept your conviction that lasting peace must be built on concrete actions." And he then joined the Abraham Accords. So now you have a total of 5 nations, I believe. And I think right after Iran changes leadership, if they do, this will be a clear, this will be an open door. Like, we're going to see the Abraham Accords explode in terms of the nations that are willing to join on now, because now the big threat in their neighborhood is gone. And I think that the Abraham Accords and what it ends up ultimately becoming, in my opinion, is something that I think the Antichrist will confirm, right? And in part of that confirmation, because by the time that the Antichrist comes along and all this stuff takes place, I believe that Gog and Magog will have happened. And I think that the Dome of the Rock and the Al-Aqsa Mosque will already be destroyed. And if they aren't destroyed already, just the other day, Iran was launching missiles. They've been launching missiles in every direction, right? So they've been launching them at Oman, at Bahrain, Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Kuwait, into Iraq, up in the Kurdistan areas. They've launched missiles over into Cyprus, obviously a lot into Israel. And they have not been, they're trying to create chaos in the Middle East so that it puts pressure on Trump to stop. But at the same time, they're they're also making enemies. All these people, all the Arab countries that didn't want to get involved and said, hey, we're not letting the U.S. fly through our airspace. They're not launching any missiles from here. Now, now they're all turning on Iran. And, it is truly just this, truly it is a turn of events I don't think they truly anticipated. I think they were trying to create chaos, and what in turn has happened is they've been they're building the Abraham Accords right now. They're creating recruits that are going to be willing to join as soon as this is all over with. So you had the original signatories in the Abraham Accords was Israel, UAE, Bahrain, Sudan, and Morocco. Now, Sudan is in a civil war right now, so I don't really count them as much of anything. But Kazakhstan just joined. So I think that we're going to see a lot more nations come on board, probably Saudi Arabia, and then the rest will just follow suit after them because of what's happened. And, Mohammed bin Salman, who was the crown prince, publicly he's saying, yeah, we don't want anything to do with this, but privately he is very excited and happy that the Ayatollah is dead, and that Mahmoud Ahmadinejad is dead, and that most of the IRGC leadership is dead. And what we see now are a bunch of independent besieged groups, or the IRGC groups that are operating independently and just launching these missiles off as fast as they can. And I heard something today from an Israeli podcast talking about this, and they were talking about the these mobile missile launcher sites, and they were calling them archers, and because they're shooting these missiles off, right? And that got me thinking about Jeremiah 49 and breaking the bow of Elam. And so I think, I can't be certain, but if the U.S. and Israel, and this is an unprecedented air campaign that we haven't seen before. It's certainly the biggest one Israel has ever flown, bigger than what they did back in June. But when you combine both the U.S. and all the sorties that are being flown and the bombs that are being dropped, this is by far the largest campaign we've seen since probably ever. Iran is a big country, much bigger than Iraq. It's got a lot of places where they've spread out all of their missile sites. And so they've been able to, I don't know how much they've been able to take out, but they've established air dominance right now. Or I don't know if they've got air supremacy just yet, but they've definitely got air dominance right now. And again, the Russian and Chinese air defense systems that were sold to them obviously were not as effective as they were marketed as being. We saw that with Venezuela as well. So that's another third order effect that now other countries are not going to really won't be interested in buying the Chinese systems or the Russian systems because they don't seem to work very well. And we have had a number of casualties, U.S. casualties. I think the number is up to 6 thus far from the bombing in I want to say wherever the U.S. Fifth Fleet is in Bahrain. I think it's in Bahrain. So one of the missiles hit this warehouse and it did kill some U.S. soldiers. So certainly not anything that wasn't anticipated. They definitely anticipated U.S. casualties in this, but tragic nonetheless. But again, I remember back during the Bush-Iraq war, where we had hundreds of soldiers dying every single month, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. And I did medevac. We were evacing a lot of these guys. And a lot of the people that were dying from convoys. Like we were driving convoys from one base to another in these soft-shelled Humvees. And they were just, and it got so bad that units started refusing to go because they're like, what? We're just going out there to die. I mean, basically that's what's going to happen. Every one of these convoys was getting targeted by IDs. So it was not good. But that did, there is certainly I would expect there to be a number of U.S. casualties depending on how long this goes on. the 3 jets that were shot down by Kuwait air defense systems, which were Patriot systems, which is American systems. All the crew members survived, so they were all able to eject out of their jets and land safely. I'm sure they've got some PTSD from I can't even imagine that, but I can imagine they survived, so they're all able to get back into the fight whenever they're ready. But certainly a tragic nonetheless, and I'm sure it wasn't intentional because you've got all sorts of stuff flying around, drones and everything else, and in Kuwait and Bahrain and Dubai and all these other places that have any type of air defense systems. You just got to remember that they're not experienced like our soldiers are. Like this is probably the first action they've ever seen. Whereas most of our soldiers have seen multiple years of action and combat sorties and things like that. So I certainly expect probably more friendly fire incidents, even some hostile fire there in Iran if they're able to keep any of their gun sights up. But as soon as these things launch, they launch from these mobile sites. They go in and destroy the archer, as they're being called, these archers. And those things, each time they launch a missile from those things, those mobile missile sites, it takes them about 8 hours to get them reloaded. So 6 to 8 hours. So they shoot their volley off. And one thing that Iran isn't short of is they have a lot of missiles. They have this thing called Missile City underground, and it's so far down that even our JDAMs and GBUs and things aren't able to effectively neutralize them, and they're so spread out across the country. So I've seen reports that a lot of IRGC are fleeing into Afghanistan with their passports and stuff. You've got a lot of the IRGC members are leaving. They don't want any part of that. They can't stay because they know that the people know who they are and they'll be killed. So they're just running the other direction. So I don't think that the government there, the IRGC government, is going to last much longer. I could be wrong. There could be holdouts here and there, but I think by and large, we will neutralize them fairly quickly. All right. So that's it. I think Trump is trying to achieve his goal for world peace, or at least peace in the Middle East, and do something that no other president's been able to do. And he knows that all hinges upon the Abraham Accords, normalizing relations between Israel and all of the Islamic neighbors. You have his board of peace, which will handle the rest of the world with all the movers and shakers. And I think that I can't say exactly how this will all play out, but it does certainly seem like it's setting the stage for this final kingdom that's coming. Now, a couple of things that I'm thinking about too is Turkey. I used to think that Gog and Magog was Russia, Turkey, and Iran. We know that Iran, Persia still plays a role in this somehow, some way, shape, or form. It seems highly unlikely in the present time because you've got Iranians around the world rejoicing and dancing, and they are thanking the United States. They're thanking Israel for getting rid of the Ayatollah. So you're like, how can a nation that is so happy about Israel, even Netanyahu and the U.S. for taking out their repressive government, how could they turn around and then launch this massive assault onto Israel? Well, we know that Iran has got this exploding population of Christians there. And, if you take the rapture into account, the rapture is going to remove all the believers from the earth. And if you get all of the Persian Christians and they're all removed from the scenario, what's going to be left? You're going to have Muslims. And in their case, they would be Shia Muslims. But I think what Iran ends up becoming is more like a staging ground for a lot of the former Soviet satellite states. Everything from Pakistan, Afghanistan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, all the stands begin to move against Israel. They begin to march from the east. And you will also have Persians that will join in there that still hate Israel and still hate the West. And so I don't know that it's going to be Persia writ large or Iran writ large. It's definitely going to be the militants within those populations that are going to be moving. But I don't know that Russia proper, like I'm talking Putin, Medvedev, Moscow, St. Petersburg, all that kind of stuff up in the very north. I mean, they are bleeding soldiers like crazy with this Ukraine conflict. I don't know the total death count, but I guess on both sides, it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 500,000 that have died already. I mean, it's crazy, crazy high. But you still have a lot of Muslim dominant states within Russia that would gladly join this attack against Israel, from Dagestan, from Chechnya, places like that, Azerbaijan. All of those countries would march against Israel, and I think that could happen. That will happen, but I believe it happens after the rapture, but before the 70th week begins. So that would fall into this gap time, and however long that gap is, I'm not entirely sure. But I will just say that it seems like when you factor into the rapture into the equation, which is the ultimate black swan event with regard to global geopolitics, because nobody in the world at that level is even thinking about the rapture as even anything other than a joke, right? So they don't take it seriously. And if they do believe it, they believe it's, decades to centuries away. It's, the very, very end. They don't see it happening, anytime soon. So they don't take it seriously. But that would certainly create a vacuum in the world, especially as big as we are now. And then if you take out believers from all over the world, and the restrainer is removed, because when you remove the born again believer, you're removing the Holy Spirit ministry of restraint. When we talk about us, the church collectively, you're removing that from the earth. Now, the Holy Spirit is omnipresent, and the Holy Spirit, and I've said this many times before, I'll just keep saying it. The Holy Spirit was on the earth the day before Pentecost, when in Acts chapter 2, the Holy Spirit was still omnipresent. Yet he came down and his cloven tongues of fire, and his role in this particular dispensation that we're in has been very different than it was in the other dispensations. So the Holy Spirit is omnipresent. So the Holy Spirit is not going to be removed from the earth, but this restraint, this ministry of restraint is going to be removed, because the church is going to be removed from the earth. And if you look at, you look at the United States. The United States is as powerful and as successful as a nation. Not that we're the oldest nation, but we're the oldest government that stayed the same government this whole time. Like certainly France has been around for a long time, but look how many times French government has changed, or the British government has changed, or the Russians, or the Chinese, or whoever. Everybody's changed from what they used to be. But from 1776 on, we've been a republic, a constitutional republic. And that's the genius in how the founders framed the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and everything. But that was largely shaped by Judeo-Christian ethics. When you pair that up with Greco-Roman law and philosophy and government, and you kind of get the best of both worlds in that regard. And that's what's made the United States successful this far. But when you remove the Christian component from that, when you remove the moral ethos from that, you no longer have that kind of same restraint that has been present in the world this whole time. And look at the Roman Empire. I mean, a lot of historians blame the spread of Christianity on the collapse of Rome, because they went from being this warfaring nation that just wanted to dominate and conquer everything, now to be converting to Christianity. And not to say that they were perfect or they didn't have wars, but it certainly changed the nature of Rome and the whole Roman Empire as it became more and more Christian. And at the same time, you had the barbarian hordes coming down. the Visigoths, the Vandals, all those groups coming down and sacking Rome and sacking northern Roman cities. And so the Roman Empire began to kind of collapse at that point. But a lot of people blame Christianity on it because it brings, it carries with it that Judeo-Christian ethos of love thy neighbor, you know. And who's your neighbor? Your neighbor's whoever's around you, right? And it's always trying to convert the world to Christ rather than to force the world to Christ. Now, obviously, the Roman Catholic Church is not innocent of that. They certainly tried to spread Christendom through the sword and through violence and through corruption and logistics and everywhere else. But, you know, I'm just saying that Christianity has had a stabilizing influence on the world wherever it takes root and dominates. The United States obviously is a little bit of an exception in that, and we've kind of ebbed and flowed as a nation in terms of our willingness to go to war or what it finally took to get us into a conflict. But the Holy Spirit's ministry of restraint on the earth is what's going to be removed at the rapture. And after that takes place, all those people that were in Iran or that were in Kazakhstan or that were wherever, nothing's going to hold them back from wanting to spread Islam or spread the sword to those who will not convert to Islam. There's not going to be anything holding them back anymore. And just like we see the same zeitgeist spreading throughout the world, this idea of hedonism, secularism, all that kind of stuff, violence will spread after that, and it will be chaos, and people are going to be making these mad. It'll be like a Black Friday sale, you know, right after Thanksgiving, and the new Nintendo is coming out or whatever. You know, all the Walmarts, man, people just kind of stampede in because they're all trying to get whatever it is that's on sale. You know, and it's chaos and people are trampling each other. We've seen videos of this over and over. We're kind of ashamed as Americans that we do this, but this happens. This is what's going to happen right after the rapture. It's going to be this like global Black Friday sale that the whole world's going to try and capitalize on the vacuums that are created with the U.S. out of the equation temporarily. And, you know, especially then after the battle of Gog and Magog, militant Islam is going to be wiped out, and that's going to create a vacuum. Which the false prophet and the whore of Babylon, that whole ecumenical system, once militantism is gone from Islam, there's not going to be any other kind of religion that's going to really oppose it except for Judaism. The church is going to have been removed. You have the tribulation saints that will be there, but they're going to be increasingly martyred and killed for their faith. So there's the vacuums that are going to be created in all of this stuff that's happening. So Trump's peace plan is not going to really work out, but I think what he's doing now is he's laying the groundwork for what the Antichrist will pick up and run with, because he's kind of broken the mold on strongman leadership in a very successful way, in a way that's not been achieved by Putin or anybody else in the last, since I wouldn't even compare him to Hitler, but I would say, because it's not been entirely military, it's been economic, it's been all these other things, but you know, he'll have the spread of Napoleon or the spread of Hitler in terms of success in spreading American influence abroad and here and abroad. So certainly the U.S. is stronger today than it's been in the last 20 years, maybe 30 years, since the fall of the Iron Curtain and the collapse of the Soviet Union. You know, the America has never felt as strong. Now, all that to say, we know how the story ends. We know how this is all going to play out. We know what's coming after the United States. And this is largely going to be this beast kingdom. And again, the rapture does not start the tribulation. the covenant with the many starts the tribulation, starts the clock. So you have the rapture. I imagine there's a period of time where there's some chaos in the world, and the world's trying to jockey and reshuffle the deck and trying to figure out who's going to be on top. And I think that's where Europe's really going to step up at that point and really going to take the lead role in beginning to exert their dominance over the earth, especially if they have some type of Donald Trump-esque like European leader that's able to rally all of Europe together under one banner. And I don't think the European Union is going to keep that name. I think even NATO, I don't think will stay around. I think NATO will be converted into this European Defense Force, European Army, Navy, Air Force, whatever. And the European Union may rebrand themselves into the new Roman Empire, whatever they're going to call themselves. But right now, they're this unpopular bureaucracy that doesn't have a long shelf life, in my opinion. And if you're a young European that's out of work and you're thinking about joining the military, you don't really get excited about joining the EU army. But if it was like rebranded as the new Roman army or something, like, people would be joining in droves to be a part of that because it's historic and you know, it's got a glory associated with it and the greatness of Europe back in the first and second, third, fourth centuries, you know. So I really do think that we're going to see some type of new revived Roman Empire, and they will call themselves that. They will call themselves the new Roman Empire or whatever it is, because the United States is going to be out of the picture at that point. Now, let me back up a little bit. The United States the country is still going to be here. The cities, the roads, you know, the infrastructure, all that stuff's going to exist, but the government is going to change. And when I say that I see Europe rising up and all that stuff, that may not happen until a year or two into the tribulation. And that may be after the gap time. I think the United States, if it's able to hold itself together after the rapture of the church, then certainly she could be Babylon. She could be this revived, all the power could still rest with the United States in terms of our military might, our mineral wealth, our oil, our land, our resources, all that kind of stuff. But I do think that the Europeans are going to be able to take back control, and eventually the U.S. will get destroyed. And I don't think it'll either happen because the 10 kings destroy the East Coast or whatever. They wipe out New York, Washington, D.C., all the major power players or major cities within the United States, and just are done with us at that point. And then they're the dominant force on the planet, and we're subservient to them. Or the U.S. is destroyed during the trumpet judgments. And I've shared this theory. And again, it's a theory. I don't know. I can't prove it. And we won't know until it actually happens. But when you have a third of the trees that are burnt up, I don't know if that's a third of the trees around the world, like every third tree is burned, or if it's all of the Americas, because all of the Americas, North, Central, South America, have a third of the trees in the world. So that seems like kind of a logical assumption there. A third of the oceans is the Atlantic Ocean. If those two things are taken out and now you've got the world kind of cut in half, and now everything is kind of centered around the Middle East and Europe and Africa and Asia, just kind of like it was in the old world, in the ancient times. You know, that's how the world was then. They hadn't really discovered the new world. They hadn't colonized it or whatever. You had some Vikings that had gone over in the 900s or whatever, 1000 AD, and maybe some Chinese had made it over, but really not a whole lot of people had made it over. So the whole world was the old world. And that's where I think a lot of the rest of Bible prophecy seems to be focused around Israel. And you've got the geographic places that happen, whether you're talking about in Egypt or the Valley of Megiddo or the kings of the East marching, the Euphrates River drying up during the bowl judgments, even an Iraqi Babylon. I was thinking about this, like, because right now the Grand Fa port there in southern Iraq, Iraq's got a very, very tiny waterfront, tidy. They're almost landlocked, but there is a little bit of territory that they have that they're trying to develop this Grand Fall port. And the only way that I think that could actually be made happen faster is if the dam in Turkey broke, and that caused the dam to flood the Euphrates and then the Tigris rivers, and those all began to pool down in southern Iraq, because southern Iraq is almost sea level, and that could speed things up, I guess. Will it happen? And that could also account for the Euphrates eventually drying up. So there's some play in that we don't know just yet what's going to happen with that dam and how that impacts the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. Anyways, it's fascinating to consider all these things. Obviously, we're going to have to wait and see, and we'll be watching this from the mezzanine, as it were. And I don't know if we'll get to watch the whole thing. We may be busy doing other stuff, and it may not even be anything we even care about watching, because we're not going to want to watch the world that we just came out of just being utterly obliterated and destroyed. And I don't know, maybe we will. So, okay, that is pretty much it. And I'm at an hour and a half. Let me take your questions now. Thank you, moderators, in advance for that. I think Tyler was on. Oh, that reminds me. So Tyler and I will get together on Wednesday, not to live stream or anything, but just to kind of game plan. But we plan on doing a video, the Final Four, at some point here in the next week or two, probably next week, or maybe the week after if we, I don't know. I'm gonna leave this up to Tyler when we get on, but we'll definitely do a video, Tyler and I, probably in person together, and then come talk about the Final Four. I would really like to look over the last 4 years and look at all the prophetic things that have happened over the last each year. Major things that have happened since we did that video. So it's interesting to see how much has happened in just those 4 years. All right, let's see. Whoop. Okay, this was on. Here we go. From Annette. Question: have you heard the war in Iran started on Purim, according to Dr. Ken Johnson, the Dead Sea Scrolls? Yeah, I've heard that. And interesting, the connection that we're fighting in Iran during this time that's largely been associated with Persia and Esther, the book of Esther, and Haman and Mordecai and all the whole story there. It is fascinating that it's during Purim that this is all taking place. So, and that the Ayatollah was killed. So, as well as tonight, I guess tonight is it tonight that has a planet parade, or was that last night? And then we have tonight, or I guess it's this morning, like this coming morning is the blood moon that happens. It's like at 3:33 a.m. at 33 degrees in the sky, and crazy. And all that is crazy. I don't know what to associate that with. You know me, I'm not big on stars and moons and all that kind of stuff in terms of associating that with the fulfillment of Bible prophecy. Obviously, we know that the moon turning to blood and the sun turning to black as sackcloth, that takes place inside the 70th week itself. So I think we'll see that fulfillment then. But it's always fascinating when these things fall on Jewish holy days. And also, speaking of calendars, the attack happened on the Islamic calendar on the 9th month and the 11th day, so 9/11, that we took out Iran. Or rather, we took out the leadership in Iran. Patrick Hart, question: in Jeremiah 49, do you see the dispersion of Elam fulfilled in 79 or yet future? In what sense is or will the throne of God be set up in Elam? So I read the stuff from, I think Amir Sarfati posted that Elam is not Persia. Lee Brainerd picked up on that. So I do think in part, well, obviously the Iranians have been in diaspora. Many of the Iranians live abroad. Once the Ayatollah came to power, they fled the country. So there has been a dispersion of sorts thus far. Obviously, there's still 90 something million Iranians living there. So it depends. It depends on what gets hit in this bombing campaigns. And if they hit some places that make living in Iran untenable, I mean, they have some nuclear facilities. I know that we hit the Isfahan, Fordo, and Natanz nuclear sites in June. There may be some stuff we don't know about. Could be chemical weapons, could be biological weapons. We don't know what all they were up to. So there could be a possibility that we hit something that causes people to leave, and they have to leave. They can't stay there. So I don't know. I'm on the fence on that. Part of me thinks it's yet future, and part of me thinks that it was done in the past. And I guess you could make a case for both. Obviously, Amir has done that, and others, but the only thing that gives me hesitance is that we know that Iran plays a role in Gog and Magog. So even if it were something like we hit some kind of a chemical facility or whatever that basically spread poisonous gas throughout Iran and people were dying and had to flee, and it was kind of nasty that way. There could be that role, but then you still got to factor in that they're going to amass the forces of Gog and Magog are going to be coming out of Persia as well. So it may not last too long, but I don't know. It's really hard to say. And I've always wrestled with Jeremiah 49 and 50. I know if you ask Bill Salas and others, they'll definitely have more stronger opinions on that. But my answer is I don't know. But as far as the throne being set up there, I think that when Christ, I think that it's going to be in the millennial kingdom that Christ is going to have his throne there. I don't know that he's going to rule. He's going to be ruling from Jerusalem and David's throne, but he may have somebody there sitting representing him as his representative, like we have our ambassadors that are out all over the world. This could be a throne for his ambassador. It could be Daniel or somebody, I don't know. Somebody could be ruling in his place there. It would be a bit of divine irony if he had like Mordecai or somebody ruling there. So I don't know. I do think that that's in the millennial kingdom. That aspect of it is Ghoster 7. Since Russia is making a way for the IRGC and its leaders to presently alive to come to Russia, do you think that this is going to be the buildup that draws Russia into war with Israel? I had heard that there were plans for the Ayatollah, his family, and the senior IRGC leadership to flee to Russia, but since they're all dead, I don't know. Just like this, their assistant secretary of defense or whoever said, their deals they made with Iran were made with the Ayatollah, and he's dead now, so they count those deals as null and void. So I don't know that they still have any type of loyalty to shelter Iran, the Iranian leadership there, the regime leadership. Not to say that some haven't made it up there or haven't fled there or whatever, but honestly, I think that the hook in the jaw for Russia, if it's Russia, it's going to be the collapsing of even if it's temporary, the temporary setting aside of the United States so that we can't come to Israel's aid. I think Satan would be very effective in whipping up all of the Muslim hordes from around the world, from Europe, from Africa, from the Central Asia, even from Russia, all the Muslims that are there from Europe, to march on Israel because the U.S. is not able to come to her defense. And it could be right after this that Israel is feeling like they've finally achieved some kind of a peace. Like, because all this time since '79, Israel's had the proxies of Iran. They've had agents of Iran, threatening their livelihood and threatening to destroy them, especially like Hezbollah. So, Hezbollah was decapitated back in 2 years ago or a year ago. They took out Nasrallah, and they took out all of his leadership, and all the pager attacks, that took out all the senior leadership, that way. So I think this is more of an Islamic thing than it is a Russia, like what we think of Russia, like Putin in Moscow and that stuff. But again, there's so many Muslims in Russia now that it could easily that those armies come out of Russia and they're wiped out. What's interesting is that it's going to be Sunni and Shia that are going to march together and ultimately get to the point where Israel's not going to know what to do, because the only thing they might have left as far as an option goes is like the Samson option. They bomb themselves so that they don't get taken alive, but somehow God prevents that from happening and he wipes out those forces. And the tragedy in Gog and Magog, in my opinion, is at the end of it that the Jews think they're done. They think that's their version of Armageddon. And they will readily come into this agreement with the Antichrist because they think they're in their messianic age at this point. That whoever this leader is that rises up, that they make this confirm this covenant with, for them the Messiah is a man. It's just a man, like a Moses or a David or even a Trump. Somebody like that is whatever you think about Trump, you love him, hate him, whatever. He is definitely iconic, just as iconic as like Abraham Lincoln was or George Washington. And he's a force of nature. He's just a force. He just wherever he goes, he's the most popular person on the planet, the most well-known person on the planet, put it that way. I mean, you can't go to any country in the world, if you show them even a resemblance of Trump, they're going to know who he is. And this is who they are looking at in terms of a Messiah figure, is just a normal man that is a great leader, a great military. He's just the epitome of perfect leadership that at first is going to seem very friendly to Israel. And then we know at the midpoint, he betrays them and commits the abomination that causes desolation. And then he begins to try and wipe out Israel. So let me tell my daughter good night. Better tell all my kids that, or else I'm going to be in trouble. One second, folks. More to go. All right. Oh, I need this. From user Robin MP. Question: do you see this triggering the new money system and a jack in prices of gas and groceries? If they're able to close the Strait of Hormuz down, the Red Sea, or Persian Gulf rather, I do see gas prices going up, which obviously will mean everything else goes up. And I haven't looked at gas today, so I don't know how much it's gone up by, but I do see this as a possible. No, I don't necessarily see this as the cause of the why we flip over to a completely digital system. I think that's going to come along more in the line of a financial crisis of some sort. It could find its genesis with this conflict right now, but I think it'll be something else that will cause this the fiat currencies to collapse altogether, and basically we'll have to turn over to this digital system in order to kind of keep things going, which is why they've spent so much time, really beefing it up and stress testing it in banks and all that kind of stuff to see, which they did that a couple of years ago. So I think from then until now, I mean, they've certainly worked out whatever the kinks they had inside of this digital systems. It'll have to be compatible with everything that we have today, which, today, you walk up, anything you buy, you just kind of tap your phone or your card on the little card reader or whatever. You don't even have to insert it anymore. You just kind of tap it. And so whatever the system is that we're going to get to, it's going to have to be, it'll maybe cards that are tied to this new form of a digital dollar. But I think the crisis that triggers that may be something else altogether. And I wouldn't be surprised if that crisis stems from the Epstein files. It could come out of some new type of pandemic type event that happens. The difference on this one, though, I think the mortality rate would be considerably higher, to the point where there won't be any people that are doubting that it's a real thing, like we did in 2020. I got COVID. I recovered very quickly. A lot of other people got it, and it was nothing. We know that the people that had comorbidities or they had, were elderly or had weakened immune systems, things like that, they succumbed to COVID. But for the most part, average healthy person gets it. They're sick for a little bit and then they recover. The mortality rate on whatever is coming, I think, would have to be considerably higher. 20 to 30% mortality rate would probably do it. That would cause everything to lock down again. But I'm particularly scared of this particular scenario because it seemed like Trump was on a roll in his first administration, especially after the Abraham Accords. And then we got, all of a sudden, out of the blue, we got this COVID thing that was, started to become a thing, and then it became a reality, and then it really started to suck. But if they see Trump as unstoppable in terms of his agenda to do what he wants to do in the world, they may throw something like that at his second term here, where some other new thing gets unleashed upon the public in order to derail his agenda a second time. Now, do I think that he's already thought through that? Probably. He's had 4 years out of office that I think he war gamed a lot of this stuff, that he's anticipating the deep state and global power players to try and derail his agenda. And you saw from day one, in his second time in office, he went after the deep state in the U.S. And so I think that he is definitely going to have pushback on his agenda sometime in this second administration from some entity that does not want him to succeed in what he's doing. So far, he's effectively, basically, I don't want to say gutted the federal government, but he's definitely taken a hard look at all the different agencies and organizations within the U.S. government and tried his best to get the rot out, as it were. Obama appointees, people that are hostile to his agenda, etc. I mean, even just a few days ago, Kristi Noem, discovered this secret room in their DHS headquarters that there was like a door. Nobody knew where the door went. So somebody was like, what is this door to? In their headquarters, in their main offices. And they go in there, there's people that are recording everything. They're, well, I haven't heard who they were or what they were doing. Could be CIA, could, whatever. But certainly you still have those type of moles and whatnot inside of these agencies that are still trying to subvert the Trump's agenda. Then you have all the stuff with the Epstein files, the names. I don't know. I'm pretty positive that they're going to release all the names. Like, I think that factors into Trump's plan because he knows he's not in there. But he knows also that if they release every name, it's going to, I can't remember who it was, maybe Tulsi Gabbard or somebody that said that if we release all the names, it would collapse our system. So I certainly think they're trying to figure out how to do that, both release all the names and at the same time not collapse the system. Again, I don't know. I'm not defending his decisions on the Epstein files. I'm not cheerleading for them. I'm just saying that he's had to factor that into how that stuff gets released and how that stuff gets brought out and how these people get brought to justice, all these predators and stuff. So how that actually happens, I don't know. Obama's lawyered up. Obama's I just read this the other day. They went in and retained like 9 different law firms or something, or law teams or whatever. And you've got Clinton, both the Clintons in there in closed door hearings, giving depositions about Epstein and their connections to him and Ghislaine Maxwell and all that whole nasty mess, as well as all the stuff that Hillary Clinton was privy to with the Anthony Weiner laptop and the Hunter Biden laptop. All that stuff is coming out. And if we've seen anything with Trump, he loves timing. And he may be holding that as a ace up his sleeve, as it were, to prevent the deep state from derailing his agenda like they did the first time around with COVID. And you got to remember, they had that, was it that wargaming session back in like November where they had this global pandemic and you had all the who's who, from the WHO, right? The World Health Organization. You had Bill Gates. You had all these different power players that came in and were wargaming what happens if a pandemic is unleashed. And then, just within a few months, we had COVID. So how suspicious that all looked. He's had to factor this in, that they're going to try and do something like this to his agenda. So he may be holding that Epstein files in that regard as like a ace up his sleeve. Like, if you do that, I will unleash every name. We will hunt you down. We will publicly drag you through the streets. It may be that kind of a power play. I don't know. So U.S. strikes sink Iranian aircraft carrier, massive airstrikes in Tehran. That's just going on right now. Okay, from Jennifer Hargrove, blessings from Idaho. Oh, I love Idaho. Man, it's beautiful up there. Questions. Share your thoughts about the war in Iran being the fulfillment of Jeremiah 49. There's a huge debate about it right now. Value your opinion. Thank you so much. So I just addressed that earlier. The bottom line is I'm not sure. I definitely, you could see some of that fulfillment in the last 47 years with the diaspora, with the Iranian people. Israeli commentators talking about taking out the archers, shooting all the missiles. Obviously, a bow would be the device that shoots the missile. So if you can take out the bow, they can't shoot their missiles or arrows, as it were. Obviously, the throne is not there yet, because that'll happen in the Millennial Kingdom age. But yeah, I guess I'm on the fence on that too, because you could look at it either way. It was fulfilled in the past. Elam is a separate group from the Persians. All that stuff that Amir's talking about. or if you go the Bill Salas route or whatever, that this is actually a fulfillment of Jeremiah 49. I think you pray about it, you read it, and you let God impress upon you what you think is the right interpretation for that. Again, a lot of these things that we see inside of Revelation, I know this is in Jeremiah, but when you talk about like the last days prophecies, even in Gog and Magog, I mean, with the armies that's going to be fighting there, certainly we have let's just say hypothetically that we were able to wipe out the entire IRGC government leadership. The Shah Pahlavi comes into power, creates a very peaceful Iran, gets them back on their feet. They're a kind of a democratic republic or whatever they become. How does that factor into Gog and Magog? Because we know that Persia is a player in Gog and Magog. It's hard to wrap our minds around this because it's hard to see it right now because we're constrained by the present. None of us can see into the future, so everything we have is kind of an educated guess at that point. So honestly, I'm not entirely sure how that all plays out, but I kind of think it's still future, and whatever it is that we haven't seen it yet. So hopefully that suffices. But if you're looking to validate an opinion, obviously you have, Amir's opinion over here, and you've got, like, say, Bill Salas and others on this side. I think at this point, does this have anything to do with the rapture? And I would say no. So what we're looking for the rapture of the church, and we know that rapture is the signless event. It is not preceded by a sign. It doesn't have to happen on Pentecost. It doesn't have to happen on the Feast of Trumpets. It doesn't have to happen on even Tish B'Av, one of my favorites. It doesn't have to happen. We don't know when it's going to happen, but we know that we're close. We know that we're in the season. And as Tyler and I will discuss in an upcoming video, we'll kind of share our thoughts on the final four and why this year could be the year that the Lord returns. It certainly seems so many things are lining up. I don't know that it could go much further. And, I know people in the past might have said that, say, leading up to World War II, this is it. This is going to be the big battle, and the Lord's going to come back at the end of this war. But there were so many things that were left, that even the things that we don't even question today, they couldn't even wrap their minds around back then, like the mark of the beast or the two witnesses. Like, how can the whole world see their bodies laying in the streets? Or how can one person control all buying and selling in the world? They couldn't do that back then. So there were still so many, and Israel wasn't even a nation yet. So, there were so many things that were not. So many things that were, like, even Israel becoming a nation again, people could not see how that could happen. But now it's ancient history to us. It's been 75 years, 76 years or whatever, or 77 years since that took place. So it's not even a question to us anymore. We know it. It's reality. It's history for us. It's happened. And, Israel reclaimed the entirety of Jerusalem, their holy city, their holy capital. That happened in 67. So, I think when it is fulfilled, that we will absolutely know it, though. I don't know that we'll be here on the earth when it happens, but we will definitely know it. That may tie in with Gog and Magog as well. Could what we're doing right now be part of the justification that the Gog and Magog forces use to retaliate against Israel? Absolutely. But you got to remember, it's going to be Sunni and Shia, and they're going to be coming from every direction, north, south, east, west, and they're all going to encircle Israel, and it's going to seem hopeless. Like it's going to seem absolutely hopeless, and then God is going to supernaturally deliver them and wipe out all those forces, those militant Muslim forces, And again, you have another vacuum that's created. And what's going to fill that vacuum is going to be this final beast kingdom, the religion, the whore of Babylon, whatever that system is going to look like, which I think probably looks a lot like Roman Catholicism because it's very ecumenical. It's willing to bring everybody in under one banner. Logistically, the Roman Catholic Church is one of the best suited to do that. And, they're right there. And they have the historical ties to ancient Rome, and they still consider themselves an extension of Rome, hence Roman Catholicism. So, and they're the connection between Rome and Europe and Israel and everything else in the Mediterranean. So I definitely think that they're a player in that. From Tyler Berman, do you think Trump's new American system of production will end the deep state and unknowingly start the setup of the new global order, aka the beast system? Yes, I absolutely think that that's true. I think if you listen to Pete Hegseth back in November, he was speaking at the, I think he gave a speech at the War College, and he was talking about acquisitions, the acquisition process that we have in the military today. And I've talked about this in the past, but if you want to watch a good show on this, that by the end of it, you will totally get what I'm talking about. It's called the Pentagon Wars. And it has, I think, Kelsey Grammer, I think, is in it, and Carrie Ewells, the guy that was in The Princess Bride, As You Wish, that guy. And it talks about the creation of the Bradley fighting vehicle. And the Bradley fighting vehicle started out as a concept in 1950s. And it wasn't rolled out until like the 1980s. It took that long to get that stupid truck off, the whatever tank into production and out to the soldiers to use, because so many people got their fingers in the pie and wanted to make this change or that change. And by the time you were done with it, man, that thing was supposed to swim underwater like a submarine and do all kinds of crazy. And it was chaos. But that's largely been this model of procurement and acquisitions and development that we've had all these years, where you come up with a concept for a jet or a plane or a tank or a rifle or whatever, and it goes through it just takes forever to get from the napkin that was drawn on into the hands of the soldier or the pilot or whoever. Decades, usually, in the minimum, a decade or years. And Hegseth wants to get this timeline down to under like a year, from idea to out to the soldier within a year. That is unprecedented, the speed at which things are going to be created. And now with 3D printing and things like that, molecular manufacturing, as Britt Gillette often talks about, that timeline is going to evaporate. It's going to be gone. It's just going to be like, you're going to be able to make these things as fast as you can make them. I mean, like, they're just going to be readily available, and we won't have a shortage of weapons going forward once that happens. And I think that's what the Beast Kingdom will pick up on, and rapidly replenish their weapon stock in order for the red horse to ride and for peace to be taken from the earth, etc. So I think that is going to absolutely be the model, if you will, of what the Beast Kingdom is going to use. It's all about efficiency. And if you've heard anything from the Trump administration, especially in their first year, everything was about efficiency. And that's why they don't really have any qualms with letting, whatever the percentage of the government workforce go from every agency, because AI can start doing a lot of what what would normally take 10, 15, 20 people to do. AI can do it now faster than them, and it doesn't need to take breaks, and it doesn't need vacations, and it doesn't need overtime pay and all this other stuff, unions and all that. They are looking for maximum efficiency, which means that you have to start removing the human out of the equation if you want to achieve that. Because humans are, we still have to eat, sleep, take vacations, that kind of stuff. So I think that idea of ruthless efficiency is going to be what the beast kingdom operates off of in terms of how they are able to amass power and military might so quickly. But I think we're creating that right now as we speak. From Messianic Gentile Proverbs 30, what are your thoughts regarding the seed of men will not mix with miry clay? Oh, man. Okay, so a couple of thoughts. One is that this could go either way, or actually it could go one of three ways. Either it has something to do with disclosure, and it has something to do with the revelation that we are not the only players in the universe. And either we have some type of bodies that we can extract DNA or whatever they have as DNA. Thank you, Rick. I appreciate that. Or it has to do with technology and mixing technology into the human body, or both. So those are three. And that's talking about from like a biological level. From like a geopolitical level, you could look at it like you have strong nations mixed with weak nations, and they're just not going to be able to really kind of coalesce into this global fighting force that they're trying to make it into. I kind of leaning toward the first option. I do think that Satan has spent the last 70 plus years filling our minds with Roswell, with UFOs, with third encounters of the close kind, all the movies, the Hollywood, the books. We've just been inundated with this idea that we're not alone. And I don't think that's all for nothing. I do think that will come to some type of fruition. We've been conditioned all these years to just kind of accept that. So I think that's going to play itself out into some type of whether it's disclosure or there's another term that they're using where these things are actually brought out. But what we can know is that if these things have been on the earth, like let's say that the U.S. is holding biologicals, as they call it, bodies or whatnot, and even if they don't, I mean, even the stuff that we've been able to find on the earth, like the bones of the Nephilim and all that stuff that's been hidden in the Smithsonian, in the basement vaults there. The intelligence agencies from at least the 90s have been able to get their hands on this stuff and are conducting all sorts of genetic experiments because they want to create super soldiers. They want to do all this Hollywood stuff with this exotic material. We know that from a technological standpoint that we've reverse engineered a lot of the ships and stuff that we found. Lockheed Martin, Skunk Works, all those groups are absolutely flying like the Tic Tac type stuff. They whatever the energy it is that they use, I forget off the top of my head what it is, but they're flying these things and they're doing these things. Even remember last year, not this January, but the prior January, and then the December before that, you had all those drones that were appearing all over, like in New Jersey, all over the U.S. and in the UK. And I certainly think that some of those things were not human. The ones that were way up in the sky that were like spheres within spheres, kind of spinning around, kind of like the whole Ezekiel angel thing. But a lot of the drones and stuff that people did see, there were some that were just sitting in the sky like for hours, not making a sound. And I think some of that is our reverse engineered technology, this whatever it's using to remain airborne and be able to stay at a hover, silent and just floating around or doing whatever. I think that has to do with this reverse engineered technology that Skunk Works and others have been able to get their hands on. And that's why it was all kind of swept under the rug as soon as the Trump administration came in. We know what it is. I think Caroline Levitt or somebody eventually came out and said, yeah, we know they had a FAA clearance, and we know what those are. They're not hostile, et cetera, et cetera. But then she dropped it and then went on to whatever the next subject was. And we kind of had so many crises and things, news breaking, that was all kind of like last week, which might as well have been, last century for all we care. There's all the stuff happening. Okay. Melody Phillips question. Hello, Pete. Will we, the remnant, be here when the fourth beast kingdom takes over the earth? We believe that harpazo happens prior to the rise of the Antichrist. Thank you. No. So when you look at, again, the rapture doesn't start the 70th week. The signing of the covenant, or the confirming of the covenant, Daniel 9:27, is what starts the clock. And from there, it can be a little bit hazy, but we know that in heaven at the same time, or I know that we live in time right now, but when you step into the heavenly realm, they're not in time like we are. They're not bound by the time of the universe. If that makes sense, they're stepping into the eternal realm. So I don't know if Jesus does the opening of the seals all at once, like he opens one seal, the horse comes forth, the rider, they go out, and he opens the next one, or does he wait however long and then opens another one? I think he intends to open them all kind of in a row consecutively, but how they play out on the earth will happen in time. He opens them up one after the other, right? But on the earth, they're starting to happen, and then they happen in time. So the rider on the white horse goes forth, and whether that's the Antichrist himself, or it's the system of the Antichrist that he rises out of, like the 10 kings, and then he rises out of the 10 kings. There's that. Then you have the rider on the red horse, who then takes peace from the earth. And then the rider on the black horse that brings in this extreme inflation and economic ruin. And I think that that's the system that gets everybody on board with the mark of the beast, or at least the digital system, the precursor to the mark of the beast. If there is a precursor, maybe it's just straight into like the mark of the beast technology at that point. But on and on, the rider on the pale horse, etc. And they seem to ride throughout the entirety of the 70th week. We know the rider on the white horse rides for the entirety of the 70th week. And that's the distinction between those judgments and then the other ones, right? We know that the martyrdom and the fifth seal judgment keeps happening, at least to a point, until there's no more tribulation saints to be martyred, or they're at that point hidden by God or protected by God so that the Antichrist can't reach them. So it's by the time that system comes into place, the church will have long been gone. Even just reading a normal cursory reading of Revelation, you read in Revelation 1:19, where Jesus tells John to divide the book up into these three parts: the things you've seen, the things which are, and the things which take place after. So the things he saw in chapter 1 was the glorified Christ standing amongst the candlestands, and he's got 7 stars in his right hand, and his face is shining like the sun, and all that. That's what John is seeing there on the island of Patmos there in 95 AD. And then after that, he says, write these, this goes to the 7 churches. So we have the next chapters 2 and 3 that are dealing with what I think is the church age. And for the last 2,000 years, we've been in this church age. Yeah, those were real churches in John's day, and what was then Asia Minor, today Turkey. But I think because of the order that they're given in, they are indicative of the churches that would take dominance at certain points throughout time. And those churches then would become representative of the main face of Christendom at those given particular times of the last 2,000 years. And so historically, we can look back and we can see how that fits pretty well with what we know of history. So after the church, those 7 letters to the 7 churches, which is mentioned, that word ecclesia is mentioned 19 times in those 2 chapters, or the first 3 chapters. Then after that, you don't hear that word again. It's never used on the earth again. They go straight, John is there in chapter 4, verse 1 and 2, and he's immediately sees a door open in heaven, and he hears a voice saying, "Come up here." And boom, he's immediately in the spirit, and he's immediately there and before the throne room of God. And you got the sea of glass. You've got the 24 elders sitting on their thrones. You've got the cherubim. You've got myriad and myriad and myriad of saints. And I know some people that want to put the church inside the tribulation. They say, well, look, 13:7, where the Antichrist is able to, God's not holding him back from killing any or all of the saints. So that word saints there is where they lock into, and they say, okay, well, that's the church. Well, no, saints is a very generic term for those that belong to God. The word saints, that word saints is used in the Old Testament, and it's used in the New Testament. It's used before the church was created, and it's used after the church is gone, and it's used while the church is here. So it's a very generic term that applies to both Old Testament believers and New Testament believers. So what is exclusive to the church is that word ecclesia that's used 19 times, and then it's not used from chapter 3:20 or from chapter 3 onward. It's not, it's not used after chapter 3. So it tells me that the church is, it's an argument from silence, but it's a pretty loud one, And so I don't think the church is going to be here. I think scripture is pretty clear on that point. The church wasn't in the first 69 weeks, and we're not going to be in the 70th week. So we're in this gap in time between the 69th and the 70th week. So from Justin Tracy. Hey, Pete, any thoughts on John Bellham's recent article, 1933, where he alluded to a what's next moment if we wake up still on the earth on 1/1/27? Well, let me just say this. I think Tyler and I were pretty clear on the Final Four that we said we could be here in 2027. We could be here after that. I think what he and I put together was a pretty simple theory on Hosea 6:1 or Hosea 5:15 through 6:3, talking about the 2 days, and on the 3rd day he's going to revive Israel. We're at the end of the 2nd day now, with regard to where we are in relation to Christ's death, burial, and resurrection, which, coming up on 2033, that would, back that up 7 years. That put us in 2026. Now, in 2027, let's say that we're still here in 2027. Does that mean that our theory is wrong? I mean, we don't know. The thing we don't know, and the big if in all this is like, or what 2033 represents. Is 2033 the beginning of the tribulation? Then that means that that's the rapture still hanging out there, and we could be taken up anytime between 2027 January 1st all the way through 2033. I mean, absolutely, it could mean that. The 2033 could be the midpoint. So that means that we back that up 3.5 years. So sometime in 2029, the rapture the rapture happens before that. And then 2033 is the midpoint. 2033 could be, we're hoping it's the end, the end of it, so that we'd be raptured this year. But again, we don't know. So I don't know. I would say that if we go beyond 2030, if we go into January 1st of 2034 and nothing, at that point, I would be like, okay, either our calendars are way wrong, and all those guys that we're talking about missing centuries, the whole Tartaria, is it Tartaria? The Tartaria theory and the missing centuries and all that stuff. I would have to consider that. But then again, Israel's back in their land. Psalm 90:10, the whole that passage. Let me actually read that. I used to have it memorized, but I think I've since forgotten it. So the only chapter in all of the Psalms written by Moses is this one. Well, I'll start in verse 4. For 1,000 years in your sight are like a yesterday when it is past, and like a watch in the night. You carry them away like fools. They are like a sleep. They are like a sleep in the morning. They are like grass which grows up. In the morning it flourishes and grows up. In the evening it's cut down and withers. For we have been consumed by your anger and your wrath. We are terrified, and you have set our iniquities before you, our secret sins in the light of your countenance. For all our days have passed away in your wrath. We finish our years like a sigh. The days of our lives are like 70 years, and if by reason of strength they are 80 years, yet they boast is only labor and sorrow, for it is soon cut off and we fly away. So it's one of the things that Tyler and I talked about early on was I had brought up this what was it called, Tyler? It was a cone of confusion. And it's an aviation term. And if you're flying in a plane or a helicopter or whatever, and you're flying instruments, and your NDB, which is your little indicator pointing, it has one arrow pointing on and it's got all the cardinal directions around it. So it's pointing in the direction, and you're flying on these radials, towards the beacon. Non-directional beacon is what NDB stands for. And the closer you get to it, it's just going to be locked onto it. But as you start to fly over that instrument that's sitting on an airfield somewhere, and you're at altitude at like 1,000 feet or whatever, and you're just using that to guide you to go to wherever the next point is. As you go into that cone of confusion, that thing starts spinning around, and it starts becoming unnavigable. You can't use it. You have to wait for it to you hold the heading that you're on. You have to wait for it to give you the tail. And now the head is pointing back to the NDB. Before, the head was pointing to the NDB. Now it's pointing backwards. But in that cone of confusion, it's just like spinning. So I think we're in that moment now where things are spinning. Things are happening so fast, and they're happening with such rapidity that it's really hard to get our bearings. But I am 100% confident that 2033 factors into this. I will say that for me, it's 100%. I don't have any doubt that it's that. So if there's any kind of 1933 moment for me, it's going to be January 1st of 2034. And so say nothing has happened by then, which I don't believe that, but I'm just saying if that were the case, that's when I would be like, okay, we're in uncharted territory. I really don't know where we are at this point. Either our calendars are all messed up or whatever, but we do know that we're in the final Jubilee. And so we know that for sure, according to the Essenes calendar. So there's that. And then I know Ken Johnson, I mean, he's not one to say that we have to wait to the end of the Jubilee for that to have any type of fulfillment. And he makes a very good point that I think in Jesus' day, I can't remember the exact timing of the Jubilee at that time when he was there in the first century, but his arrival, his appearing wasn't at the end of the true Jubilee. It was at the beginning of it. So we could see something still happen. And we just, at that point, we're kind of out of theories, because every theory that we had kind of had the second coming happening in the 2030s. And I'm talking about all the major theories that are out there. Don Kane, if you go to Don Koenig's website, the prophetic years, or just type in Google, when will Jesus return? And the prophetic years, you'll come up on that article that he wrote back in I think 2007, and that's the one that really shaped my understanding of this in a large way, because I never really looked at the second coming happening any other time other than the 2030s. And then obviously you would have to back that up 7 years, and it either puts you at the middle or to the end of the 2020s. But the second coming happening inside the 2030s is most of all the major rapture theories that are out there, all kind of generally, if you carry them out to their most latest fulfillment, it's always been in like the 2030s. So March, what is the date, Pete? 18th on the Essene calendar? What is the date today? I'm not sure. But going back to this idea about 1933, and we're still here in January 1st of 2027. And I just saw Tyler had brought this passage up. When they say peace and safety, sudden destruction comes upon them. I don't know. I mean, what is Trump trying to do right now? He's trying to establish peace in the Middle East. He's trying to establish peace everywhere, really. But he's super hyper focused on the Middle East because that's something no other president has been able to do. And I tend to think that when they say peace and safety, that's dealing with the Middle East. And if you take out the big bad of the Middle East, which is Iran, and they become a normal, neighborly nation that's getting along now with Saudi Arabia, it's getting along now with the United States, get along with Israel, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, you could think about it this way: if regime change is completed here in these next few weeks, and Shah Pahlavi comes in and takes over, he could join the Abraham Accords. Iran could join the Abraham Accords very easily, and Saudi Arabia. I mean, who would have thought that would have ever happened in our lifetime? I mean, that would certainly be some earth-shattering geopolitical news. And certainly Israel would feel, and I'm not, well, let me back up. You still have Turkey, and they're still increasingly hostile to Israel, and they are still embedded there in Syria with the government there. So you have that's still there. But if Saudi Arabia and Iran join the Abraham Accords, I mean, that would definitely be a new world we would be living in, and something none of us have ever seen in our lifetimes, or even for more seasoned people, not even in your lifetimes. So that could certainly be something where they feel like they've finally achieved this peace, and let's say also that they take out Hezbollah and all this other stuff takes place, and they have been. So I don't know, even the government of Lebanon today was saying, hey, if you do want to take out Hezbollah, no skin off our teeth, just leave us alone. We don't want anything to do with Hezbollah. So they've divorced themselves from Hezbollah, which is the first time they've ever really done that. So I don't know. That would be pretty fascinating to see if that happened. And when they say peace and safety, sudden destruction comes upon them, I think the sudden destruction happens at the rapture, because that, again, it creates this huge vacuum in the world. And that's going to be like the Black Friday sales of all Black Friday sales. I mean, people are going to be just going robbing and pillaging and rioting. And you think things are crazy now, it's going to be insane at that point, because the world will have just been turned on its head. Okay, Donna, if the strait gets closed and barrel of oils double or triple, can't we just produce our own? Isn't Texas ready to go? So we are much better placed today. And I'm pretty sure Trump would have had to factor that into this equation about, hey, we do targeted strikes on Iran. They could still close the Strait of Hormuz. or even if it's not closed, there's a lot of ships that are not going to want to sail. And I think I don't know if you've watched any of the shipping videos or whatever, but there's still a lot parked outside of the Persian Gulf. They don't want to go into it for obvious reasons. But once I think Iran and their threat is gone, so there could be a momentary spike in these things. I think Trump would have, whether it's through Venezuela or through all our own ramped up oil productions. I don't think it'll be as bad as it would have been if Trump had tried this a couple of months ago. Iran would have been much better positioned to strike. More than closing the Strait of Hormuz, I think the fact that if they strike the Saudi oil fields in the eastern part of the peninsula, that would certainly skyrocket fuel prices. Like if he'd done this back when he first talked about doing this back in, say, like November, or even like December, we weren't in position to stop a lot of these rockets they were able to launch. And I think they would have absolutely destroyed the Saudi oil fields, and that price of oil we'd been paying $10 a gallon. And even with our production ramped up, a lot of places in the U.S. isn't even refining oil anymore. Look at California. I mean, California has already lost 2 or 3 major refineries. They've just moved out of California because it was too costly for them to do business there. And they just said, hey, we're done. We're moving. So some of that's been shifted to Texas and other places outside of California, but not enough to, I mean, we could offset it in oil from our allies and places like that. I think we could have offset it, but it's still going to be like $2 or $3 higher than what we're paying now. So. Amy Potter, do you know the modern name of Sidon in Ezekiel 28:29? I think Sidon is Lebanon, if I'm not mistaken. H-I. It's a Canaanite city, Sidon. Yeah, I think what's her name? Jezebel. I think Jezebel was from Sidon, if I'm remembering correctly. She was up near Tyre or somewhere, and Ahab married her in a kind of a political alliance with them or whatever. So I think it's up in where's today Beirut. From Aldo, Pete, do you think Pahlavi will get back in? And secondly, do you think as a Muslim he would treat Christians fairly there in Iran if reinstalled? I do think he would treat Christians fairly. I think let's just play this out. So we were able to overthrow the IRGC. They're all wiped out. Pahlavi comes back and he's some type of a transition government. I think he would be very friendly to Christians, to Jews, to everybody. I think people there have been under this crazy theocracy for the last 47 years that they may resort back even to a highly secular nation in terms of the way like Turkey used to be before Erdogan came into power. So I do think that they could resort back to that, much the way that Iran was prior to the 79 revolution. So the last thing he's going to do is impose like strict Islamic rules and hijabs and all that kind of junk. I think he'd be very pro-Western. He spent all his time in the West thus far in exile, and so I do think that he would be very pro-U.S., pro-Israel. Again, I think they could join the Abraham Accords. I think that would be earth-shattering if they did that under him. So so yeah, I do think he would be. Catalin, or Jason, I'm sorry. This is something that I thought about today. Do you think Tucker is a type of Judas, as Judas was greedy, lied, self-righteous, and didn't believe Jesus, who he said he was? I don't know that he's Judas. I think that I think guys like him and Nick Fuentes and the folks from Redacted and Candace Owens, I think the one common thread that they all share is that they've all bought into this idea of replacement theology, that the church has somehow replaced Israel, and that the Jews there are not the real Jews of the Bible. So somehow they've bought into this lie, and it runs really strong in Roman Catholic or Roman Catholicism, because they believe they're the kingdom, right? I mean, that's the whole premise of Roman Catholicism. That's why they have a pope. That's why they have all the logistical setup that they do. They believe that they're the kingdom here on the earth, and the pope is ruling vicariously for Christ, who is currently ruling in heaven. They have a man on the earth that's ruling. So that's why I think the Roman Catholics have always been pretty hostile to Israel. So I can't remember what Tucker is. I think he's like Episcopalian, or replacement theology is unfortunately spread throughout Protestant denominations as well. So whatever denomination is, I think he was probably raised in it, and believes very much in this idea of replacement theology. So I think that's the common thread that all of these, at least on the right, have bought into this this idea that the Jews there are not the real Jews. And that's the other thing about replacement theology. I don't know what it is about conspiracy theories. Like, I love a good conspiracy theory, but I mean, every channel that I've ever watched that is really all they focus on is like conspiracy theory, they almost always become anti-Zionist, anti-Israel, because somehow it all gets tied back or blamed on the Jews. When you unwrap that onion enough, you get down to the rotten anti-Semitism. So, a lot of those folks trade in that conspiracy stuff. And especially if you bought into replacement theology because the church you grew up in, or you're Roman Catholic or Episcopalian or whatever, even Reformed theology is becoming that way. So not necessarily a Judas, but certainly somebody that's bought into this ridiculous heretical belief that the church has somehow replaced Israel. So, but he is greedy. He lies. He's obviously is drinking his own Kool-Aid. So, from Hammer Time, Pete, do you have any skepticism regarding Trump? He is behaving very differently than his last go around, and even from how he campaigned. Not skepticism. I want to say that. I mean, I'm certainly not a prophet or anything like that, but you just got to factor into the reality that, look at everything he's gone through. He came into office, I think he was surprised that he won back in 2016, and he was an outsider to Washington, D.C. He was an outsider to politics. He didn't really understand, I don't think, or maybe he was naive in some ways about, he wasn't naive about the left, but he was certainly naive about the right, and how many traitors would be in the Republican Party, from the old Bush dynasties, the people that were tied in with the Cheneys and the Romneys and the Ryan, what's his name? Ryan, the guy that was running with Romney in 2012, his VP was Ryan something. He was like the Speaker of the House for a little while. yeah, you have the neocons, you have the rhinos, you have the establishment Republicans. I mean, uh, they were just as corrupt on the Paul Ryan. Thank you. They were just as corrupt in the right in a lot of ways as the left was. You know, they just had different interest groups. So I think he misjudged how corrupt it really was on both sides. And, you know, then he got the whole Russiagate thing. You know, they were targeting him right even before he took office and targeting Michael Flynn and others. Then they, you know, he spent the next 4 years trying to impeach him. They, you know, did 2 different impeachments on him. And then the whole COVID thing, summer of love, the 2020 elections, how he was winning going into election night. He was winning on all like these 4 swing states, and then they all shut down voting mysteriously at the same time. And then the next thing you know, Biden's up by like thousands, and it's all Biden, you know. And so I think all of this has certainly jaded him on this whole process, but I don't think he wanted to go out like a loser. You know, he didn't want to go out, just go quietly into the night. I think it made him angry. And I think he plotted for the next 4 years about how to take back the office that was rightfully his, that he was supposed to, you know, technically he is in his 3rd term right now, or he would be in his 3rd term. But yeah, then 3 now assassination attempts, 1 nearly successful. The lawsuits that were waged against him, the spying, the raiding of Mar-a-Lago, all of that I think is factored into the force of nature he is today. And so certainly, yeah, he's different this time around. And you could see from day one, he came in with an agenda. Like, he knew exactly what he was going to do. I think he still knows exactly what he's going to do. And I think this whole idea of these linchpins of taking out Venezuela, if you take out Venezuela, it has a domino effect. It gets China and Russia out of South America in a large way. It causes Cuba to collapse. It causes the cartels to collapse. And, you know, everything he's doing, I think, is all building towards creating Fortress America. And by creating Fortress America, he makes America relevant for the next 100 years. Now, obviously, you and I know that that's not going to happen because, you know, we don't have that kind of time left. So again, I point back to the article I wrote, Blind Spot, and, you know, as great as their plans are, they're not factoring in Bible prophecy. And unfortunately, it's going to catch them all, you know, so. But yeah, he's definitely different this time around, much more jaded. Okay. Sir Pierce. Yep. You know what, Sir Pierce, I almost am positive that I added her the last time. I know I did, so I'll have to go in there and see what happened. But thank you guys for the questions. All right. Well, oh man, it's almost 3 hours again. Crap. What did I say I was going to do? I wasn't going to do 3 hours. Here we are again. Well, you guys have so many good questions. It's hard to say no. K Gone of the 99. He's going to get his face on the Mount Rushmore. Yep. I could see that happening. I mean, if we were going to be here, I think he would love to have his face on Mount Rushmore. Pallavi, yes. Mount Trumpmore. They could change it to Mount Trumpmore because he's hijacked the Donroe doctrine, the Gulf of America. I mean, yeah, who knows? But Kagon, you're looking ripped, man. I bench pressed 300 the other day. I was super pumped. I haven't done that in years, so still massively doing my legs, and then getting my chest strength back up to just bench press, either incline or even flat. Today I was doing incline press 225, which I'd never really been able to do that before. I'd always been I could do a flat bench 225 all day, but the incline, just the angle of it and stuff is very kind of awkward. You have to use your stabilizer muscles a lot more than you would if you're just laying flat. So, so definitely loving being back in the gym and getting my strength back and doing pull-ups like crazy. Like I hadn't done pull-ups in years. And once I lost all that weight, I started doing pull-ups again. And now I can, it's not a thing anymore. Trump calls. I bench press myself out of bed today. Love it. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I feel better. I feel a lot better because I was almost 280 a couple of years ago. Man, that's like, if you can imagine carrying around an 80-pound weight, like a barbell, that's what I was carrying around all the time, all this extra weight. So definitely love being, back in shape. Now we may get Rapture tomorrow and it doesn't really matter, but at least I can check some blocks for myself, personal growth and all that. So. Well, all right, folks, thank you for hanging out tonight. Definitely enjoyed it. Hopefully you got something out of it. Again, I think Trump's plan, his ultimate plan obviously would be to get the Abraham Accords back on. I think if he achieves, aside from lowering gas prices and inflation and those kinds of things, I think his legacy is going to be both domestic and abroad. But I think the abroad piece is going to be largely hinging on securing the Western Hemisphere and then securing the Abraham Accords. And if they're able to get Iran into the Abraham Accords with Saudi, if Iran comes on under like Pahlavi, and Salman, Mohammed bin Salman would definitely join, that would be earth shattering. That would it's never happened before. So I think that could also factor into this whole 1 Thessalonians 5 scenario where they're calling peace and safety and then sudden destruction. So, I think we're close, folks. I do. Tyler and I may not even get to make this video. We might be raptured before then. So certainly wouldn't complain about that. Thank you guys. It's such a privilege to be able to do this for y'all. I love it. I'm overwhelmed by what God's used me for. I'm not worthy of any of this, but he's taken somebody as beat up in battle scarred as myself and still been able to use me in this life. I'm very humbled by that. So thank you guys. And again, I'll be on Substack tomorrow. And that's just a hanging out, talking, ask me personal stuff in it. That's more of the kind of the just us getting to know each other kind of thing. And then Wednesday, I'll be on with Pastor Gary right around 4 p.m., I guess, Central Standard Time. And then that'll probably go to about, about 5 o'clock or so, 5:30 maybe at the latest, because that'll be like 11:30 for him. So I know he's not going to want to stay up that late. But thank you, moderators. Thank you for you guys watching tonight. And certainly by the time I come out next Monday, who knows what will have happened in the world by then. It seems like every day just earth-shattering news breaks every single day. So it's crazy now. So just God bless you guys. Keep praying for me. I'll keep praying for you. Lift each other up in prayer. All the standard things I normally say, be salt and light in your community. Yes, Melody, Don Koenig, the Prophetic Years is his website. Keep sharing the gospel wherever you go. And keep your head on a swivel. I'm not so concerned about these, like, Iranian sleeper cells here in the United States. I think with the Ayatollah dead, I think that's really taken the steam out of their form of jihadism. And there's no real successor to take over for him other than Pahlavi, which is, the not an Ayatollah or anything. So I don't know. I think what we've seen in Austin Saturday night, and then I think in Ohio there was or maybe it's in DC, Beltway or somewhere, some stabbings or whatever. I think those are largely going to be one-offs. I don't know that it'll be any type of coordinated sleeper cell activity. I could be wrong. I hope I'm wrong. I mean, I hope I'm right that this is not. These are one-off events, and they're not some type of coordinated effort. They don't seem to be coordinated. The guy in Austin was from like Senegal, and then I'm not sure about the one in DC. But yeah, head on a swivel. I mean, we still live in dangerous times, and it's not just from crime or terrorism or anything, but dangerous in false ideologies, false teachings. Man, it's everywhere. So just keep your wits about you. Keep your nose in the Bible, and Maranatha. We'll see you guys the next time if the Lord hadn't come and taken us before then. So I do want to say one last thing. We're working on some shirts. Pretty excited about the couple of designs I have. And I don't know, we'll see what they look like when they come out and how it all works out. But hopefully at some point we'll have shirts available for people. And I'll, all that stuff, I'll run that through Substack and all that. But yeah, it'd be cool to get some merchandise out there, and you guys can support some Rev 310 stuff. Sunshine Church false teaching is rampant. It is rampant, dude. It is everywhere. If you go to Substack and look at they rank order us, I guess popularity or whatever. And you look at the top 10 and it's just like, and this is just in the faith and religion section. There's some really bad theology in usually in the top 10. I'll change that if I ever get in the top 10, or somebody I know like Gary or Prophecy Watchers or whoever. But there's good ones sprinkled in there, but like, man, there's some really just name it, claim it stuff in there. So. All right. Well, thank you guys. Good night. God bless you. And I'll see you tomorrow night, or I'll see you Wednesday night. Either way, hope you have a great week, and keep looking up. We are near, folks. We are near to the Lord's return. So we are very close. So God bless you. Good night.